What is up, everybody? Welcome to Pub Sports Radio and welcome to Stat Diggers, where we go balls deep into the stats for this upcoming card. And we have a pretty good one. I know last week on paper, it looked like it sucked. I think it delivered a little bit. This one on paper, I will say that there's a lot of great matchups on this card. I think there's a lot of great fights and really looking forward to it as always. Before we get started and get into the video, if you guys can leave a like on the video, you guys have been killing it with the likes. I think we got, close to 200 last week, so maybe hit that 200 mark this week. So hit the like button, really does help us out. And then also subscribe so you don't miss out the content throughout the week. And like always, today we are going to go balls deep into UFC Vegas 30. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of great matchups, and a lot of spots that stick out first look. So before we hit the chat up, we'll hit up Uncle Weezy. Uncle Weezy, how are you doing? And you looking forward to this card?
I look forward to every card, man. There's always opportunities to make money. There's, it doesn't matter how low the level of the fights are. We can find opportunities if we look deep enough into the stats and in the tape, and we can make some really good decisions. So, hell yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. UFC Vegas 30, that main event's going to be killer. Two great heavyweights, a lot of interesting fights on this card. I can't wait to get into the stats with you, man. I think we're going to find some angles and find some opportunities like we did last week.
100%. I can't wait to get into it, hear all the stats. And, this show, I really like it for myself personally. Like, I know we just started doing it, but since we've been doing it, it's great to see, the different angles of the fight. I know you got to watch the tape, you got to look into the stats, but I think, actually digging this deep into the stats, I think it really does benefit, hopefully people out there watching it. It even benefits me. It benefits me quite a bit. It allowed me to, make some bets last week. I know I hit like 3 unders in a row, and that was because of this. I mean, the stats, we saw it was the Matt Brown fight with Diego Lima. They had a combined 18 losses by finish. 18 losses by finish. Now it's 19, but that under was sitting at plus 135. So just one example of, you can look into the stats, you watch the tape, and some spots really stick out, and I think we'll find some here as well. So we will hit up the chat here. What is up? Easy money for sure. Not sure who we're talking about there, but Volkov evolved his tattoo. Did he? Can't wait to see that. Next week, I'll be on Yancy Madero's. What's up, y'all? Great profitable card yesterday with a whole lot of violence. Yep, I did very well myself. Hopefully, you guys made it out alive because that card was it was a tough one. I'll be honest, it was a tough one. Brady and Uncle Weezy, let's go, baby. I agree. Gane is way too slow and doesn't go after it when he needs to. And Volkov, we have a dono in the chat. Shout out to Dan for the donation. Probably only the equivalent of like 6 American pennies, but I've been coming here empty-handed 2 weeks now. So hopefully you do make some money, Dan, this week. Hopefully you do find some spots for you. Get those bets on Rakhmonov before he becomes minus 500. Yeah. The line is moving on that. Love the mindset. There's always an opportunity hidden within 100%. Brady and Zunkel. What is up, Chris? How you doing? Brady and Uncle Weezy, let's go. I agree. Bigger Volkov equals Swolkov 100%. Volkan, fight good decision, a good spot. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about it. And what is up, Earl Sweat? Gane throws more volume. We'll talk about that as well. So I say we jump right into it. Again, before we get started, if you guys can hit the like, let's get those likes up. And we will start with the first fight of the night. And I'm sure they'll switch up the bout order throughout the week. They switched it up like a million times last week. But as of now, we have the first fight of the night, which is going to be Yancy Madero's going against Timur Hadzovic, a fight that we were supposed to see a couple weeks ago, maybe a month and a half ago. And somebody pulled out. I forget exactly what happened. Uncle Weezy, you can let me know if you know what happened. But as far as Madero's, he is 33 years old, 5'10", 75-inch reach. And Hadzovic is 34 years old, 5'9", 70-inch reach. In terms of the last couple fights, Madero's lost to Lena Venata by decision. He lost to Gregor Gillespie by knockout, lost to Donald Cerrone by knockout, knocked out Alex Oliveira, and knocked out Eric Silva. As far as Timur Hadzovic, he got submitted by Renato Moicano in like less than a minute, I think. He lost to Christos Giagos by decision. He knocked out Marco Polo Reyes. He beat Nick Hine by split decision. And he lost to Alan Patrick by decision. So, Uncle Weezy, I'll kick it to you. Let's get into some stats for this first fight of the night.
Absolutely, man. We got a couple guys here that are coming off a fairly long way off. Both Hadzovic and Madero's have not been in the cage for over a year. If we look at the pro experience between these two guys, we see that Hadzovic has got an advantage in terms of the cage time with about 50 minutes advantage. Hadzovic a 13-6 record in 19 fights. Madero's a 15-7-1 no contest record in 23 fights. And then we go to the UFC experience. Both these guys have got careers that are well over 10 years. They're both veterans. They're both in their 30s. They're both, running up on 35 here. But Medeiros does have a 5-inch reach advantage. That's something we can hang our hat on. When we go to the UFC experience, 14 fights for Medeiros, only 7 for Hadzovic. So we see that more than half of Medeiros' career has taken place in the UFC, while Hadzovic has had 12 fights outside the UFC, 7 in. Average fight time for these guys, both under 10 minutes. If we get into the finish stats, we see that both of these guys have more than one way to finish you, as Medeiros has 27% of his career wins by submission, 53% by KO for an 80% finish rate overall, and Hadzovic, 23% of his wins by sub, 54% by KO for a overall 77% finish rate. So both of these guys are finishing over 75% of their fights, which is pretty impressive. And if we look at how they're losing fights, we see that Yancy Medeiros has been finished in 71% of his pro losses. So that'll be 5 out of his 7 losses. 3 of them by KO. 2 of them by it doesn't matter. It's 57% by KO.
Yeah, I think he got knocked out 3 times and then submitted once, I think.
Okay, yeah. So, in the losses that we've seen in the UFC, this guy is getting finished more times than he isn't. So, for Hadzovic, we got 4 losses. 1 of them by sub, 1 of them by KO in the UFC, and his overall rates are 17% for both. So, if we go on to the striking stats, we see that Yancy Medeiros throws a lot of volume, and he has to, because he's couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat, with a 35% striking accuracy. Not very good. Hadzovic landing 2.99 significant strikes out of 6.42 for a 46% striking accuracy. But the power numbers are interesting, because we see that Yancy Medeiros is landing a knockdown on about 2% of his significant strikes landed. So 1 out of 50 significant strikes landed for Medeiros is resulting in a knockdown, and it's 1 in 100 for Hadzovic, which is pretty good too. Anything over 1% in this division is a really good power number. So both of these guys are definitely showing some power. In terms of looking at the defensive sides of things, we see that Yancy Medeiros is absorbing 5.66 significant strikes per minute out of 10.64. So he's landing 4 and absorbing 5.66. So his defensive skills aren't great, but he does bring that power, and sometimes that makes up for the defensive deficiencies that he's showing. We also see only a 46% striking defense for Medeiros. That's really poor. He's probably blocking a lot of punches with his face. While it's really the opposite for Hadzovic. He's absorbing just as many strikes as he's landing, but look at that striking defense, 66.27%. That's very impressive. And he's also been knocked down on 0.5% of the significant strikes landed against him. But if we look at Medeiros is actually twice as chinny, because he's getting knocked down twice as much as Hadzovic is at 1.1% of the significant strikes landed against him. So 0.93 knockdowns allowed per 15 minutes for Medeiros, 0.23 for Hadzovic. So we got guys that both have power here, and we got guys that, especially on the Medeiros side, is landing with a lot of power, but he's also absorbing a lot of strikes. He's poor defensively, and he's getting knocked down quite a bit. So if we move on to the grappling here, we don't see much offensive grappling out of either of these guys, which leads us to believe it's probably going to be a striking battle. 1 out of 4 for Medeiros in 14 fights. So 1 takedown in 14 fights, only 4 attempts in 14 fights. 25% takedown accuracy, 0.13. And then we see Hadzovic, only 5 attempts in 7 fights. He's gotten 3 takedowns, 0.68 per 15 minutes. Both of these guys control their opponents less than 10% of the time. So that's a nice little statistic to tell us that both of these guys are probably going to do something that they like to do, which is strike. Because if we look at the defensive numbers on the grappling side in this fight, we see that these guys are facing a lot of takedown attempts. Medeiros in 14 fights has faced 35 takedown attempts. He's been taken down 12 times. He's showing a 65% takedown defense. He's getting taken down 1.6 times per 15 minutes. and he's being controlled almost 17% of the time. Now, Hadzovic has faced 33 takedown attempts in 7 fights, so he's facing almost 5 takedown attempts per fight, and his takedown defense is atrocious at 39.39%. He is allowing 4.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. So this is a huge hole in Hadzovic's game that we have to be aware of. However, when you see that Medeiros has only attempted 4 takedowns in 14 fights, this is Hadzovic's biggest weakness in this fight is probably something that we're not going to see because Medeiros doesn't go for takedowns. So I think that kind of, while we see Hadzovic is better defensively striking, he's got terrible takedown defense, but that's not really going to matter against the guy who's only attempted 4 takedowns in 14 fights. And we look at, another huge hole in Hadzovic's game is he has been taken down 20 times, and he's been controlled almost 40% of his UFC career. That's a huge, huge number. So we're going to get to see a little bit different of a Damir Hadzovic this time in that he's not going to be wrestle fucked like he has been in so many of his fights so far. If we go over to the strength of schedule here, we see both of these guys have been facing pretty good competition. Medeiros overall a better ratio at 1.61 as opposed to 1.33, way more total fights. So not only is he fighting the better win-loss record in his opponents in Medeiros, but also 16.21 total fights as compared to 7. So much more experienced competition as well. The wins, 1.32 ratio for 1.13 for Hadzovic. And we see that Medeiros' wins are coming against way more experienced competition as well. And then if we look at the losses, we see that, the 1.9 ratio for Medeiros. So he's really losing to very good competition with an average record of 13-7 in the UFC for over 20 total fights, while the average record of the opponent that Hadzovic is losing to is 4.75 wins and 3.25 losses for 8 total fights and a 1.46 ratio. So let's sum it up. Medeiros has fought the better and the more experienced competition. Hadzovic on the striking side is better defensively. Medeiros throws way more volume. Medeiros has more power, but he's also chinnier. And as far as the grappling stats, a big hole in Hadzovic's game has been that he can't defend the takedown and he gets controlled a lot, but he's fighting an opponent this time who's not going to probably use that avenue. So we're going to get to see a striking battle here. And if we look at the striking battle, we'll see that Hadzovic will be better defensively. Medeiros will have the reach advantage, be probably better offensively, show them more power, but a very interesting fight. Which way are you leaning on this one?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of things that stick out in this fight according to the stats. So things that stuck out to me the most is going to be the terrible striking defense of Yancy Medeiros, number one, and the amount of times that he has been knocked out, which I believe is 3 times. Like you mentioned, he is, a little bit on the chinny side. And the other thing that stuck out to me is going to be the takedown defense of Damir Hadzovic, which is terrible, 39%. But like you mentioned, Medeiros has only landed 1 takedown in the UFC. I think it'd be wise for him to try here. It's just we can't count on him to do that because we have not really seen it. So if this fight does play outstanding, I think there's a solid chance that we see a finish. You touched on the power numbers. Medeiros has solid power numbers. Hadzovic can crack as well. And you touched on the potential chinniness of the fighters, especially on the Medeiros side. So, that kind of leads me to believe that there could be a finish in this fight. And believe it or not, I did bet on the under 2.5 in this fight when it was booked like a month ago. That bet obviously fizzled out because the fight did, but I might go back to it here. You take a look at the fight doesn't go to decision line. It's only opened up on 1 book so far, but fight doesn't go to decision at plus 135. So you assume the under is going to be at set at 2.5. Obviously, the under is probably at plus 160, plus 165 around there. At that point, I mean, I think there's some solid value. I think it's going to be one of those fights where it's going to play out primarily on the feet. You touched on the defensive issues on Medeiros, which I don't like, and you touched on the power of Damir Hadzovic and the chin issues of Medeiros. I think there's a good chance that somebody gets finished in this fight. For me personally, instead of picking a winner or betting a winner either side, which you have Hadzovic as a decent sized favorite, minus 150, Medeiros at plus 130. I might be thinking violence. So what do you think of the fight doesn't go to decision at plus 135 thus far? Do you think there's any value on that at all?
Yeah, there is, because what you want to see when you have two fighters like Hadzovic and Medeiros, who both have power and have both shown, not only do they have power, but they also can get knocked out. They also can get knocked down. It looks like this is going to be a striking battle. And so, yeah, Medeiros is going to have that reach advantage. He's going to have that power advantage that he's shown. But also, he's super, he's chinny as well, and he's very hittable. So, Hadzovic, this is got to be like a dream matchup for him. He's probably not going to get wrestle fucked. He's going to be the better defensive striker. He's at a big reach disadvantage, which is going to be difficult. He's going to have to work his way inside on Medeiros. But yeah, I agree with you, man. Instead of necessarily trying to pick which one of these guys is going to win the fight, it might just be easier to bet that under 2.5 because there's power on both sides and there's really bad defense and chinniness on one of these sides. So yeah, the under does look like a really nice bet thus far. I'm going to be looking at that as the week goes on, and when those props come out, I might be ready to pounce on that one.
I mean, especially at that number, like that seems slightly off to me. I mean, a fight does a good decision, plus 135, so I'm assuming they're going to open up the under around plus 150, plus 160. I forget where I bet it last time, but like I said, I did pull the trigger on the under the last time they fought. I forget the number. I think it was maybe around like plus 135, plus 140. So it looks like maybe even a better price this time. So I might be jumping on that. As far as like leaning to a side, I don't know. It's close. It's tough. I'll lean towards Damir Hadzovic just because of the defensive tendencies of Medeiros, the chin of Medeiros. And like you said, I think it's a dream matchup for Hadzovic here. He's going to get the fight that he wants. And I do lean towards him getting a knockout. But again, instead of betting the minus 150, I think the under or the fight isn't a good decision is probably a solid way to look thus far. So next we have another fight that could potentially hit the under as well, especially considering the Justin Jaynes side. We have Justin Jaynes going against Charles Rosa. Man, what a fight. I'm actually looking forward to this fight. I think it's going to be fun. We have Charles Rosa, who is 34 years old, 5'9", 69-inch reach, going against Justin Jaynes, who I believe is on a 3-fight losing streak, and all 3 of those losses coming by finish. He's 31 years old, 5'7", 68-inch reach. We'll take a look at the last 5. Charles Rosa lost to Derek Minner. That fight really surprised me, more so from the Minner side, because Minner is somebody that typically has about a round of gas. Ended up looking really good in that fight. Props to Minner there, but he dominated Rosa on the mat, and then he beat Kevin Aguilar in a really weird fight where it's stage striking the whole time. Outpointed Aguilar in a decision. Lost to Bryce Mitchell in a complete domination. He did submit Manny Bermudez. Remember that fight really well because I was on the Bermudez side. And then he lost to Shane Burgos by knockout in that 3rd round. As far as Justin Jaynes, so we'll start here. He made his UFC debut against Frank Camacho. I remember that fight really well because Camacho came in, I think it was like 8,200 on DraftKings, and Jaynes came in on short notice. Everybody played Camacho on DK, including me. I went really heavy on it. And then Justin Jaynes comes in here and knocks him out in 30 seconds as one of the biggest, if not the biggest, underdog on the card. So that happened. And then he loses to Gavin Tucker by sub in a fight that he hurt Gavin Tucker really bad. Ultimately ended up gassing out like he does in most fights and loses that by submission. He gets knocked out, I believe, in the 1st round by Gabriel Benitez, and then gets knocked down in the 1st round by Devontae Smith. So like I said, 3-fight losing streak for Justin Jaynes. I can't wait to get into the stats on this one, but I say we get into it right now. So what do you think about this fight?
This is going to be an interesting one. We got a couple of grapplers first here, and Rosa's, like a jiu-jitsu black belt. He's a submission artist, and and Jaynes, before getting to the UFC, was somebody who used his offensive wrestling and top game in order to kind of dominate fights that way. He was, as far as I know, I think he's like the wrestling coach at Extreme Couture. So he's had a pretty long career. I mean, if you look at the career stats for these guys, Charles Rosa, 18 fights, 13-5 record. Justin Jaynes, 23 fights and a 16-7 record. Both these guys over 130 minutes of career cage time. If you look at the average fight time, this is something that's really interesting right here. We're looking at 6 minutes for Justin Jaynes and only 8.25 for Charles Rosa. Both these guys' careers are over 8 years. So Jaynes has been the slightly more busy fighter. In terms of UFC experience, Charles Rosa with 9 fights compared to 4 for Jaynes, a 4-5 record for Rosa, 1-3 for Jaynes. The cage time, about 120 minutes for Rosa, 25 for Jaynes, and average fight time for Justin Jaynes of 6.28 minutes. That's screaming under. But Charles Rosa, 13.227. So not a lot of Rosa's fights have actually went under. And we'll look at the finish stats here. Charles Rosa, 62% of his career wins by submission, 23% by KO, for an 85% finish rate in his 13 wins. That's very impressive. 11 out of 13 wins by finish. Justin James, 31% of his career wins by submission, 50% by KO, another over 80% finish rate. If we look at how these guys get finished, Charles Rosa, 5 career losses, only one of them by KO. It came in the UFC, while Justin James is getting finished by sub 14% of the time. That's 1 out of 7. And KO 29% of the time. That's 2 out of 7. So 3 out of his 7 losses have come by finish. But all the losses in the UFC, all 3 of them, 2 of them by KO, 1 of them by sub. We know that Justin James had 4 fights in the UFC and he's never seen the 3rd round. So definitely a guy that comes out and starts throwing heavy from minute 1 and tries to finish the fight early. If we look at the striking stats here, neither one of these guys known for their striking. We got 3.11 out of 8.21 for Rosa per minute, and 3.58 landed out of 8.36 offered for James. Rosa with a low accuracy of almost 38%, and James right around 43%. James has got 1 knockdown in the UFC, or I'm sorry, he's got 2. He's got 2 UFC knockdowns, one against Camacho and one against Tucker. Yep. So 1.19 knockdowns per 15 minutes, with definitely some first-round power in the chamber for Justin James. He throws heavy. If we look, at the defensive numbers, both of these guys have been knocked down. James showing slightly better striking defense at 58% as opposed to 48% for Rosa. Both of these guys absorb more strikes than they land, so neither one of them is spectacular defensively. But if we look at the grappling statistics, I think this is kind of like where the fight is probably going to be won and lost, because Charles Rosa in his 9 UFC fights has attempted 43 takedowns. So we're talking over probably about 4.5 takedown attempts per fight. He gets 14 of them for a 32% accuracy, averaging 1.76 takedowns per 15 minutes and 1 submission attempt for 14% control time, while James is only controlling his opponents 3.5% of the time, but he's been controlled 18% of the time. So Charles Rosa is also getting controlled way more than he's controlling his opponents, but I think a lot of that actually came from the Bryce Mitchell fight, where he was probably controlled for all 15 minutes of that fight by Bryce. Bryce just dominated him from pillar to post. So if we throw out that fight, you'll probably see a control time percentage in Rosa's 9 fights that's pretty similar to his control time 4. So we see that, Rosa is going to be more likely to try takedowns here, and he's going to be more likely to attempt submissions, while James is a good offensive wrestler, but I don't think he wants to grapple with a black belt like Rosa. So we'll probably see James try to keep it standing and try to use those hands, try to land them early to get Rosa out of there early. If we look at the strength of schedule, we see that Rosa's fighting the more experienced and better win-loss record opponents. They're both losing to not spectacular competition. They both are, winning. Their wins are 0.73 and 0.5 ratios. So, below, they're fighting, they're beating guys that have more losses than they have wins. And they're both losing to pretty good competition, as the losing ratio for Rosa is 2, and it's 1.57 for James. So, I think this is kind of like going to be, even though James is a grappler, I think at heart, I think his best chance is to try to keep the fight standing. I think you're going to try to see Rosa use his jiu-jitsu, try to take the fight down to the ground, make James uncomfortable. It'll be hard for Rosa to get knocked out if he puts James back against the mat. So, I'm anticipating Rosa to use wrestling here to kind of try to use some control time. I'm anticipating James to try to knock him out early. Which way are you seeing this fight?
Yeah, this fight is very interesting. I think it's going to be very entertaining, like a lot of Justin James fights are. This guy, to sum it up, he has about a round of cardio. If he does not get that first round knockout, he's probably going to lose. We see it time and time again. And he's a finisher. When he does win, he wins inside the distance more often than not. And more often than not, he is winning in the first round as well. I forget how much it was, but I think he has like 13, like 12 or 13 finishes in that first round. So if you do like the James side, I think the first round prop is probably the way to go. I'd honestly be like really shocked if he won any other way because he has about a round of gas. With that said, Rosa has been knocked out only once in his career. It was against Burgos in that third round. Other than that, somebody said in the chat, he's not chinny. I don't think he is as well, but James is very, very dangerous. It's just if he does not get that first round knockout, he's probably going to lose. I do think that Rosa could potentially mix in some takedowns. He went over a little bit. James has been taken down a couple times thus far in the UFC. Don't think he's all that great off his back, so I think Rosa can definitely have some success, especially if James starts getting tired. I think the submission could come. It's just for me, like, I don't know. I want to take a look at the fight doesn't go to decision or the under in this fight because we take a look at Justin James. All five, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, all 5 of his fights have ended inside the distance. Or all four. All 4 of his fights have ended inside the distance, and I think there's a good chance that this one does as well. You touched on the Rosa finish rate of 84%. I like that quite a bit. And then we take a look at the fight doesn't go to decision line. It's only open on one book. I do not have access to it, but they opened up the fight doesn't go to decision at -110, which is very interesting considering the fighting style of James, kind of the killer be killed fighting style of James. Like I see James could potentially go out there and get a first round knockout or potentially gas out and get finished himself. So to me, this is kind of an under spot. I think the under is, according to the fight doesn't go decision line, is going to open up at plus money, which is very interesting there. As far as like betting Rosa straight, I mean, maybe you bet him straight. Maybe you want to hedge with that first round knockout prop of Justin James. But to me, I think it's a pretty clear pick on the Rosa side. I think he's the much better fighter. I think if he just lasts that first round, those first couple minutes, I do think he wins. My recommendation to him is probably go to those takedowns early and often, wear on James, get him tired, extend him into the later rounds, and eventually get that finish. But I like Rosa here as far as a pick. I'm not touching the money line just based off the fact that James is very, very dangerous, and he very well could take his head off. But I'm looking at as maybe a under 2.5 or like a fight doesn't go decision type of bet.
Kung Dao Chicken just said it in the chat, which is interesting. Look at that third round sub prop for Charles Rosa because, James not known for his gas tank. And, if he does gas out in the second round, third round, he might get taken down pretty easily and might, Rosa might show him the door. So that could be an interesting, it's always great to bet those second and third round props when one of the guys in the fight has got one round of gas. It's a good way to attack it.
Yep, 100%. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that fight. I think it could be another look at the violence according to the line, like fight is a decision -110. Hopefully they open up the under at plus money. I might be taking a hard look there. I mean, Justin James fights, they typically do find that under. So we'll get to the next fight here. We have a interesting fight, another fight we were supposed to see it was a while ago, like a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. Julia Avila going against Julia Stoliarenko. We have Avila, who is 33 years old, 5'7", 68-inch reach, going against Stoliarenko, who is 28 years old, 5'7", 66-inch reach. We'll take a look at the last couple fights between the two. Avila, she did have that unanimous decision loss to Ciara Eubanks. She did knock out Gina Mazzani. She did beat Panda Kianzad. As far as Stoliarenko goes, she did lose to Yana Kanutsakaya in one of, if not, probably the most boring fight I've ever watched. I went back and watched that fight yesterday. It almost put me to sleep, man. It was terrible. It was basically Yana was holding her up against the cage for 15 minutes. Stoliarenko pulled guard a couple times, had no success. Prior to that, she won a split decision. And then a bunch of subs on her record. We'll kind of get into the finish stats as well, which are very, very interesting, especially from the Stoliarenko side. But Uncle Weezy, let's get into it. Interesting fight here. I think Avila is the biggest favorite on the card as well.
She's a huge favorite. I think she's a minus 315 or something like that at this point, and she's had a good career in the UFC so far. And, and I could see why the line is wide. People who know Stoliarenko and have seen her fight know that she is the definition of a one-trick pony. She gets an armbar from guard or she loses. And it's a pretty easy thing, I mean, like, there are some fighters like this in the UFC that really they've got one thing that they can do, Abdul Razak Al Hassan, either he knocks you out in the first round or he gets his ass shaved. Stoliarenko either gets an armbar from guard or she loses. And this is going to be a pretty easy fight to break down because we just got to figure out if Avila is going to be stupid enough to go into this girl's guard or not. Let's look at the experience. Stoliarenko, 15 pro fights. Avila, 10. Stoliarenko with the experience advantage. Avila with the better record. Both these ladies' careers are 9 years and 4 months long, so Stoliarenko's been busier. Avila, 3 fights in the UFC. Stoliarenko, 2. Avila's won both two wins, 1 loss, and 0-2 for Stoliarenko. Average fight time over 10 minutes for both of them. Stoliarenko's fights have both went to decision. We just talked about Stoliarenko being a one-trick pony. She's got 9 career wins. 8 of them are by submission. 8 of them are by armbar. The other one must have been a decision because she has no KOs on her record. While we see Julia Avila gets it done with knockouts. 50% of her career wins by knockout, 13% by sub. So we see four knockout wins for Avila and 1 submission win. And if we look at how they get finished, Stoliarenko's been knocked out 50% of her losses, which is 2 out of the 4 losses. And for Avila, she's been knocked out once. Let's look at the striking statistics. We see that Stoliarenko not known for her striking at 34% striking accuracy. Another one that couldn't hit water if she fell out of a boat. And then we've got Avila at 41%. Avila bringing that power at over 1% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed. A half knockdown per 15 minutes. We see that Julia absorbs a lot more strikes than she lands, while Avila outlands her opponents. Over 50% striking defense for both of them. Neither one of them has been knocked down. And then, Stoliarenko likes the armbar. She likes the armbar from guard, but guess what? She's 0% on her takedown attempts. Yep. And, the 1-800-GAMBLER thing is it's there for you guys. It's not there for Brady and I. We understand this. We're trying to help you guys out. This is what we do. We help people, okay? Don't bet on this fight. The line is too wide. You're gonna have to bet over 3 units to win 1 on Avila. And the bottom line is that Stoliarenko can pretty much wrap up an armbar on anyone. So who knows what's going to happen here? Julia Avila, 60% on her takedown defense. She's been taken down 4 out of 10 times, but Stoliarenko's never gotten a takedown in the UFC. She couldn't take down Kunitskaya. She pulled guard a couple times, was unsuccessful. We see that Stoliarenko has been controlled 54% of her UFC career while only getting 1.28% control time. That's because Kunitskaya held her up against the fence pretty much the entire fight. And we see the same thing for Avila. While she's controlling her opponents 25% of the time, she's getting controlled 43% of the time. That's the kind of fight that Stoliarenko actually kind of thrives in. If you want to have Stoliarenko to have a chance in this fight, the last thing you want to see is that there's less than 5% control time, because it means she's getting her face boxed off in the middle of the cage. But if you see a fight like Julia Avila's career here, you add up that 25.5 and that 42.5, and you get, that's over 2/3 of Avila's fights in the UFC, and there's been 3 of them are taking place on the ground or with somebody's back against the cage, which is where Stoliarenko will probably have more success than Avila, even though Avila's ground and pound is vicious and she finishes people with it. I don't know if that's how she wants to try to finish Stoliarenko. She'd probably be better off trying to do it on the feet. And if she does try to follow Stoliarenko to the ground and finish her with ground and pound, she's actually playing right into Stoliarenko's best offensive move, which is the armbar from guard. Very interesting fight. I could see this going either way. And when I see a fight, that where both fighters have a gaping path to victory, and one of them is minus 300, it makes it pretty easy to say, maybe this is a dog or pass spot. If we look at the strength of schedule, we're not seeing much there. These are fighters who haven't fought particularly experienced competition, but definitely the advantage goes to Avila. Avila, the more powerful striker. Avila has fought the better competition in the UFC. Avila does get controlled a lot, over 42%. Stoliarenko finishes by submission. Avila finishes by knockout. Man, I'm not touching this one, dude. I could see Avila getting a ground and pound finish, but I don't think she wants to go to the ground with Julia. Which way are you seeing this one?
Yeah, this is a terrifying, man, and she's actually she's actually a little bit wider than minus 315. She's minus 350. I see minus 360. Even see minus 375 for Julia Avila. And honestly, like, she should win. She should absolutely win this fight. But at the end of the day, this is women's MMA. At the end of the day, Stoliarenko, she does have a path to victory. Her wrestling's not great at all. So I don't think she can, get this down to the mat in terms of going out there, shooting a double leg, getting it down to the mat. But she can pull guard, and we're going to see her pull guard a lot. And it's hard to trust some of these fighters. I mean, you got to think that Avila knows, hey, do not go into her guard. She has a 90% finish rate, all by submission, all by armbar. You got to think like she's got to know that, right? But we just see fighters time and time again make these silly mistakes, and I can just see it now. I mean, you parlay Julia Avila. She's looking great. Stoliarenko, she pulls guard, or maybe Avila hurts her, knocks her down. She goes to get the finish. Hey, armbar from guard. Armbar from guard, the biggest underdog on the slate wins. I can see something like that happening. It's just I don't want to put myself into that position. With that said, Avila should absolutely win this fight. She should dominate it. Maybe she even gets a knockout in this fight. But man, Stoliarenko, she has a path to victory, and that's going to be pulling guard and getting that armbar. She's very, very dangerous off the mat. She's actually not bad on the mat. It's just she cannot get it there. Her striking's not good. Her striking defense is not good. I do think that Avila should be the favorite, but when it gets to minus 370, minus 380 and all that, I just think it's getting a little bit too wide, and I would not recommend putting Julia Avila into the parlays this week. I think there's some other parlay options that are much better. We'll take a look at the fight doesn't go to decision line, which is plus 140. Fight doesn't go to decision. So the odds makers are kind of all over this one, thinking there may be a potential finish, because usually we see these women's MMA fights, closer to like the plus 250. Fight doesn't go to decision, plus 230. But no, we have it plus 140 here. So they're thinking maybe, hey, Avila might get a knockout here, or Stoliarenko might get a submission. So yeah, this is a pass for me. I don't love like the under 2.5. It's not good enough odds there. I'm going to pick Avila to win. She should win, but minus 370 is just getting a little bit too steep for my liking.
And just to add one more point, it was hard to watch that Stoliarenko weigh in at the last event. She came in heavy. She almost killed herself trying to make weight, and for some reason they tried to make her weigh in. She could barely stand. I think she fell down a couple of times.
Bad, yeah.
This is a big woman who cuts down to 135. And that's just another reason. You might be thinking, yeah, Stoliarenko's stupid tough, and she is. And Avila is stupid tough, and she is. And these girls aren't tapping. They're not giving up. But what if Stoliarenko has a bad weight cut again? She could only have one round of gas potentially. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to touch the time props. I don't think I'm going to touch this fight. Maybe if like Stoliarenko by submission is plus 800 or something, maybe I'll throw a quarter unit on it. But other than that, man, 1-800 gambler. But don't do it.
1-800 gambler indeed. This is not a fight. Kind of like the K-Moore fight with Nicolas last week, a fight that we both completely stayed away from, and it definitely worked out. So we'll get to the next fight here. We have, oh my goodness, the people's main event. Marcin Prachnio going against Ike Villanueva. Wow. I mean, Prachnio, 32 years old, 6'3", 74-inch reach, going against Ike Villanueva, 37 years old, 6'1", 73-inch reach. Let's get into the last couple fights. Prachnio, he just beat Khalil Roundtree in a huge upset. I remember going pretty heavy on the under 1.5. We'll kind of talk about why I did that. It obviously did not work out. Roundtree did not show up, and Prachnio wins a decision, which honestly, it shocked me, to be honest. He got knocked out by Mike Rodriguez in the first round. He got knocked out by Magomed Ankalaev in the first round. He got knocked out twice in the Alvi fight, got knocked down bad, got right back up. It kind of went viral where he ran at Alvi with his hands completely down, got knocked out clean against Sam Alvi. So you take a look at it there, and you see a couple knockout losses, 3 first-round knockout losses in a row for Prachnio. Go over to Ike Villanueva. He comes in against Chase Sherman, gets knocked out in that second round. Sherman looked really good. That was up at heavyweight. He gets knocked out by Jordan Wright. It was a cut stoppage, I believe some elbows or some knees cut him open there. And then he knocks out Vinicius Moreira in that second round. And I bet the under 1.5 in that fight. I was sweating bad. I think it was like in the first 30 seconds of that second round, but he was able to get it done here. Interesting fight, to say the least. Kind of looking to see into the stats here. But what do you got, Uncle Weezy?
Yeah, this is the people's main event here. These are These are two guys that are probably fighting for their UFC careers here. You know, neither one of them is going to knock your socks off. The numbers don't exactly jump off the page from either of these guys. You know, this is a low-level, light heavyweight fight here. Ike Villanueva, 12-year career, Prachnio, 7. Both these guys have spent a similar amount of time in the cage. You know, both these guys have got, Prachnio 19, Villanueva 29 fights. They've been around forever. Prachnio 4 fights in the UFC, Villanueva 3. You know, these guys have got, in those 7 fights combined, they've combined for 2 wins. They're 2-5. Very short average fight times for these guys. Prachnio in his first 3 fights in the UFC got starched in the first round 3 times in a row. And then what seemed to just be a smash spot for Khalil Roundtree. Roundtree came out, looked absolutely awful, and lost. Just an unacceptable performance by Khalil Roundtree against Prachnio there. I had some money on him. I had him in a parlay. I was sick to my stomach watching that fight. But, without getting into the stats too much, because, Prachnio, there's not much to tell. Villanueva, there's not much to tell. Prachnio is going to be the better striker, right? Villanueva is a tough dude. He does his best work in the clinch up against the cage. Both of these guys have got some power. But Prachnio should be the more well-rounded mixed martial artist. I'm saying, he should be the better kickboxer. He should have more weapons. Villanueva will be tougher. One of the ones that I think will be a good one in this one, I'll bet you that under is going to be, juiced big time, because you're talking about Prachnio. 3 out of his 4 fights ended in the first round. And this guy Villanueva hasn't been to decision yet. His last 5 fights have ended in a knockout, whether he's won or lost them. But both these dudes are really tough. And I don't know if either one of them is going to knock the other one out. I mean, maybe you might get some really good juice for the over 1.5 here, because Villanueva is stupid tough. You got to hit him with something metal in order to knock him out. Jordan Wright did stop him, but it was a cut stoppage, and Villanueva was fine. Then the other fight against Chase Sherman, that was a heavyweight fight, and Villanueva is not a heavyweight. So, the kind of power it takes to finish a guy like Ike, I don't think Prachnio has it. We haven't seen that power from him yet. We've really only seen him get knocked out. And even when he beat Roundtree, he never really had him in any trouble. That was just a kickboxing point fighting match. So, I'm kind of leaning to the over here. I don't want to get too much into this fight. These are low-level UFC fighters. Neither one of them is really a good win on their record. Neither, these guys have lost the fights that they should lose. The finish stats are probably the most important thing here. Villanueva has finished 83% of his career wins by knockout, 0% by sub. And it's basically the same thing for Prachnio, 71% knockout, 7% by sub. So if there's going to be a finish in this fight, it's going to be a knockout. But both these guys are tough. And Prachnio has lost, out of his 5 fights, 4 of them have come by knockout. And in Villanueva's 11 losses, 10 of them have come by finish. So both these guys are getting finished a ton as well. I just don't know if either one of these guys is good enough to finish the other. They're both getting their ass whooped by people that are supposed to be whooping their asses. But it's like, is Villanueva going to knock anyone out that's not named Vinicius Moreira? Is Marques and Prachnio going to knock anyone out? I don't know, man. This might be a low-level striking battle that might go over, and you might get a gift like plus 200 on the over, and you might be able to just cash that thing. I don't know. Which way are you leaning? You got anything you like about this fight?
Yeah, this fight is an absolute shit show, to say the least. But we do have Prachnio as a pretty big favorite, which is interesting. Minus 210 for Prachnio, Villanueva at plus 180. That's kind of interesting there. And then as far as the fight doesn't go to decision is minus 180. So I'm assuming the under 2.5 is going to be around like the minus 155, minus 160 area. So you mentioned it. Both guys very tough, but man, both guys have been finished a ton. Villanueva has been finished 10 times, 5 by KO, 5 by submission. Prachnio has been finished 4 times by knockout. Villanueva, 83% finish rate, 83% by knockout. Prachnio, 78% finish rate, 71% by knockout. I'm kind of leaning the other way, but again, not too confident. I kind of think there's going to be a finish in this fight. And I'm kind of, I don't hate to say it, but I'm kind of looking at the dog here in Ike Villanueva. So Pragnio is going to be, wanting to stick on the outside, stick and move. Villanueva needs to make this a dogfight. He needs to come forward. He needs to make this a war. And if he does, we've seen that Pragnio in these wars, his chin does not hold up. He even got hurt in the Roundtree fight. It's just Roundtree had zero IQ that night and did not want to follow up and finish him. But if Ike Villanueva hurts you, I think you will get the finish. As far as Pragnio go to finish, I think it'd have to be more of maybe Ike Villanueva gassing out, maybe like a late finish. But I don't really see Pragnio finishing Ike. Like you said, he's very, very tough. You need to bring like a steel chair into the cage to knock him out. And plus a lot of those knockouts were, I believe, at heavyweight as well. So I'm kind of leaning towards the dog here. Of course, I would never, ever, 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 ever bet on this fight in terms of, a straight bet. Like I'm not putting my money on Ike Villanueva, but I do think that line is somewhat off. I think Ike Villanueva needs to come forward. Like I said, make this a dogfight, make this a war. And at that point, we have seen Pragnio hurt a million times. We've seen him knocked out a million times. So I am kind of leaning towards the Villanueva side and Villanueva by knockout. I think Villanueva can knock him out here. I'll be taking a look at some of the props. Like you said, this very well could go over. I'm kind of leaning towards the under, but I don't really love the price. It's probably going to be set at like minus 150. I might be taking a look at maybe Villanueva by knockout. That could be something to look at there. But again, I might as well just throw up the 1-800-GAMBLER sign because this is a fight you probably do not want to be betting on. But as far as a straight pick, I'm actually going with the dog here.
Whatever you do, do not ever bet on Marcin Pragnio as a minus 200 favorite against anybody. It could be Malcolm Gordon. It could be the worst female fighter at 115 pounds. Don't do it. I talked about it last week. I'll just say it again real briefly. You always, when you're laying minus 200 or more, make sure that the reason you're betting on a minus 200 favorite is not because that guy's opponent is ass. You make sure that when you're betting a guy that's minus 200, that guy can finish a fight, that guy's got no holes in his game. It's real easy to look at like an Alexa Kamer last week and just be like, God, this Nicolas guy, he's a bum. He's got nothing. How does he win this fight? Well, but if you look at Kamer's performances in the past, it's like, well, how the hell does he win the fight? Where is Kamer good, right? So this, if you want to bet Villanueva, you're getting almost 2-1, and he's fighting a guy that would be considered a bum in the UFC. I mean, when you lose your first 3 fights by first round knockout, it's very rare that you're going to get a 4th fight. And he did, and he somehow managed to win it. And he point fought. It was still a low-scoring DraftKings performance, but still, don't bet Marcin Pragnio. Please, for the love of God, don't bet him as a minus 200 favorite.
Dude, I'd be shocked if people were like parlaying him up this week. I just don't really, see any reason for that. For me, it's dog or pass. Obviously, more so on the pass side of things, but we'll take a look at the props when they come out. Maybe something sticks out, but 100% agree. Like, this is a fight that probably should be passed on. Honestly, like the biggest shit show of a fight on the card, and probably by a decent margin, in my opinion. So we'll move on. Honestly, I can't wait to see the fight. I feel like it could be interesting in some type of way, but we'll move on to a good fight. We have Tim Means going against Nicolas Dalby. We have Tim Means, who is 37 years old, 6'2", 75-inch reach. We have Nicolas Dalby. He is 36 years old, 5'11", 74-inch reach. In terms of last couple fights, Tim Means did have a nice decision win over Mike Perry. I remember betting Tim Means as a dog in that spot. That was nice. He had a win over Lariana Staropoli. I want to say he was a dog in that fight as well. He did lose to Daniel Rodriguez. Not a great look in that fight. He got rocked bad, I believe, in that first round, got submitted in that second. And then he did submit Thiago Alves and then lost to Nico Price by knockout. As far as Dalby, he beat Daniel Rodriguez in a decision that I completely disagree with the score or the judges on there. Rodriguez got outlanded 2-1, or Dalby got outlanded 2-1 in that fight by Rodriguez. He did get knocked out or submitted, I think, by Jesse Ronson in a fight where he got hurt bad. I think Ronson submitted him there. That got overturned due to Ronson testing positive, I believe, for the marijuana. And then he did beat Alex Oliveira by decision, another no contest against Ross Houston. And then he beat Alex Lahore. So, yeah, I mean, interesting fight here. Means was supposed to fight on last week's card. Believes it was Danny Roberts that pulled out, but now he's going against Dalby here. So curious to see the stats on this one.
Yeah, this is interesting. I want to start something with not stat-based, but Nicolas Dalby's from Denmark, and what a little something about me. I'm of 75% Greek descent, 25% Danish descent. And so I know a thing or two about the Greeks and the Danes, right? The Danes are tough, dude. The Danes are ridiculously tough people, and Nicolas Dalby is a perfect example of a tough Dane. Like my grandmother, when she came to this country, she was run over by a threshing machine when she was 5 years old. Her leg was hanging by a thread. She had a bone graft and wound up living to the ripe old age of 95 and used that leg until the day she died. Her mother had 11 kids. One of those kids that she had back in the days when you would die from childbirth was 14 and a half pounds.
Wow.
That melon-headed kid almost tore her in half. And that melon-headed kid, like he couldn't even walk until he was like 2.5 because his head was so big. I mean, once you get off the center line, you go down like a sack of potatoes. He had to like develop an incredible core strength in order to just be able to stand. And did he let that stop him? No, man. He got married. He became a banker, super rich, super successful. I know a lot of tough Danes. And go back and watch Nicolas Dalby's career, man. This dude is so tough. He's almost impossible to finish. He's actually never been finished. Ronson did finish him, but I don't remember if that was for marijuana or if that was for actual performance enhancers.
Yeah,
but
I don't know.
You don't know either?
No.
Okay, because I don't know either, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was, a performance-enhancing thing, because nobody's ever finished Nicolas Dalby in 25 professional fights. And he's been fighting for 17 years. And, both of these guys, 17 years, 3-month careers. They started their careers 4 days apart from each other. Tim Means, 45 pro fights. Nicolas Dalby, 25 pro fights. Over 300 minutes of cage time for both of these dudes. Tim Means has got 23 UFC fights, while Dalby's only got 7. The cage time, almost more than twice as much cage time for Means. About a 10-minute average fight time for Means in the UFC, while for Dalby it's about 13.26. So Dalby goes to a decision a lot. He's almost impossible to finish, and he's not a prolific finisher himself. So we've got Tim Means with a 16% sub percentage and a 61% knockout percentage for a 77 overall finish percentage, while Dalby, it's 55%. And then we see that Tim Means has been finished by submission 42% of the time and knockout 17% of the time. So he's been finishing almost 60% of his career losses, while Dalby has never been finished technically. So yeah, both of these guys, Means the more prolific finisher. Dalby, though, not a guy that really gets finished. And even though we've seen, Means 42% of the time of his losses come by submission, only 21% of Dalby's wins are by submission, 32% by KO. So I could see this fight definitely going the distance. Two super tough guys. Dalby virtually impossible to finish. If we look at the striking stats, we see that Means throws a ton of volume and has pretty good accuracy. And Dalby, 37% striking accuracy, so not great. And he throws much less volume and lands much less than Tim Means. Definitely Means is shown to be, on aggregate, the better striker. He's also better defensively, as Means lands 5.16 and only absorbs 3.58 per minute at a 61% striking defense, while Dalby, 3.2 he lands, but he absorbs 3.57 and a 55% striking defense. Dalby, even though he's never been finished by knockdown, he's been by knockout. He's been knocked down on 1.2% of the significant strikes landed against him for 0.65 knockdowns against for 15 minutes. So Dalby on the chinny side, and Means has some power. So, we could see a striking advantage here for Means. If we look at the control time stats and the grappling stats, 23 fights for Means, only 34 takedown attempts, less than 2 per fight. He gets less than 1 per fight at 14 takedowns in 23 fights, 41% accuracy, 0.92 per 15 minutes, only 11% control time, while Dalby attempts over 4 takedowns, or just at 4 takedowns per fight, He gets them 33% of the time and gets about 1.5 per 15 minutes. He gets 17% control time, gets controlled 21, and Means also gets controlled a little bit more than his opponents control him. So both of these guys have got takedown defense right around 64%. Tim Means getting taken down about twice as much per 15 minutes as Dalby is. So Dalby might be looking to shoot for takedowns here. And neither one of these guys is being controlled a whole ton either. About 39% of control Dalby's fights on the aggregate are taking place in control time positions, while for Means it's about 26. So we might see Dalby a little more comfortable in the grappling spots here, a little more likely to go to the grappling, while we see Means having that nice power at 7.76% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed, combined with the over 1% knockdown per significant strikes absorbed for Dalby. We could see some power strikes landing for Dalby, for Means, maybe putting Dalby on his ass. If we look at the strength of schedule statistics here, they kind of jump out a little bit for Dalby, as he's got the better ratio and about the same amount of experience in terms of total fights. While if you look at the wins, Nicolas Dalby, the average record of the fighter that he's beating is 8-3. So it's kind of weird. Nicolas Dalby's actually beating better fighters than what he's losing to. While for Means, you're predictably seeing Means beat somewhat lower level of competition and lose to somewhat better competition. As in his losses, the average record of somebody that Tim Means is losing to is about 9-6 with 15 total fights, while the average loss in Nicolas Dalby's career has been to about a 500 fighter at 5.5 wins, 5 losses, 10.5 total fights. So yeah, the strength of schedule, Dalby showing a little bit of variance, maybe beating fighters he shouldn't beat, maybe losing to fighters that he shouldn't lose to. But I see Means with a little bit of a striking advantage here. I see Dalby as probably the more likely guy to go to the grappling. But we're not really seeing Tim Means get subbed a lot, 12 losses overall, only, 16% by subs. So that's two career losses by sub in 45 fights. So, I don't know if that's necessarily a path to victory. I would probably bet the over in this fight. I think that's a pretty good spot unless Means finds the knockout. But if he did, he'd be the first guy to knock out Nicolas Dalby in Dalby's 26th professional fight. And we already discussed how fucking tough the Danes are. I don't see it, man. I don't see it. What do you think?
Dude, I like it. Yeah, he's very tough. Never been knocked out. He has been dropped a lot, but like you mentioned, good recoverability. I don't really see a finish in this fight either way. We'll take a look at the line. We have it Tim Means -150, -145, and we have the fight goes to decision around like -195. I see this going the distance as well. This is a fight I need to tape a little bit more. I guess what really stuck out to me is going to be the volume of Tim Means and how much times Dalby's been dropped. I think he's been dropped like 4 or 5 times, like you said, in the UFC. Don't really think there will be much grappling in this fight. If anything, I think Dalby probably goes for some takedowns. I don't think he has much success if he does so. No really early lean for this one on paper. It seems like kind of a close fight, but like I said, this is one of the fights I still need to tape. But yeah, I do think it goes the distance as well. No action for me on this one. But as far as the fight goes, I think it's going to be a good fight. Tim Means, like I said, was supposed to fight last week against Roberts. Would have really liked to see that fight, but this fight's going to be fine. Kind of still upset with Dalby, man. I really did think he lost that fight against D-Rod. I mean, he got outlanded by a really significant margin. I think it was literally like 2-1. So I don't know how Dalby won that fight, but he kind of weaseled his way out. So maybe he does get outlanded here in terms of the numbers, and maybe gets another decision win that he loses. So I don't know. Interesting fight. I see a lot of people out there going with the dog on Dalby. Maybe it's a good look, but again, I got to look into the tape a little bit more. But really interesting to see all the stats. And I really, like I said, the thing that stuck out the most was going to be the volume advantage of Tim Means. So interesting fight there. We will move on to the next one. We have Shavkat Rakhmonov going against Michel Prazeres. And Rakhmonov, he is 26 years old. He has 6'1", 77-inch reach. Prazeres, he is 39 years old, 5'6", 67-inch reach. And I will repeat those because, man, like right off the bat, like this is important. Rakhmonov is going to be 13 years younger than Michel Prazeres, and I think he's turning 40 soon. He's turning 40 in July 25th, so about a month. which is insane there. And then we have Rakhmonov, who is 6'1". Prazeres, he is 5'6". I'm not the best at math, but that's a 7-inch height advantage for Rakhmonov. And then the reach advantage, this is crazy, like 77-inch reach for Rakhmonov, 67-inch reach for Michel Prazeres here. So I think an important thing to note is going to be that Prazeres is coming off of a pretty significant layoff. He lost to Ismail Nardiev in his last fight by decision. In that fight, he just did not look good. The cardio did not look good. I remember he got reversed by Nardiev a good 2 or 3 times. And Ismail Nardiev, somebody that I think has been cut from the UFC ever since then. And before that, beat Bartosz Fabinski by submission. Prior to that, beat Zach Cummings. Prior to that, beat Desmond Green. And then beat Mads Burnell. So he's coming off a little bit of a layoff. I don't know the exact time, but it's been a while. He's coming off of a PED suspension, I do believe. And he's coming off of some type of surgery. And he's about to be 40 years old. So many red flags stick out already from the age, the height, the reach, the layoff, the injury. All these red flags stick out already. As far as Rakhmonov, he did come into his UFC debut against Alex Oliveira, got a nice first-round submission, did cash him as an underdog. And at that point, I knew we're not going to get this guy as an underdog for a long time. So cannot wait to get into the stats on this one. I do already have a bet on this fight. We'll kind of talk about it, but let's get into it here.
Just to elaborate on the layoff, the last fight against Nardiev, February 23rd, 2019. It's a 2-year and 4-month layoff for Mr. Prazeres, and not by choice. He did have surgery. He was also suspended for PEDs, which was shocking. You wouldn't have think, a guy that looks like Prazeres would be on the juice, but it turns out that maybe he was. And one of the good things, I'm looking at the advanced stats here, and Michel Prazeres, dude, this guy 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 wins and 3 losses in the UFC. That is super impressive. His first loss in the UFC was his first fight in 2013. He lost to Paulo Thiago. His second loss was to Kevin Lee back in 2015. Then he puts together an 8-fight winning streak over Valmir Lazaro, J.C. Cottrell, Gilbert Burns, Joshua Berkman, Mats Burnell, Desmond Green, Zach Cummings, and Bartosz Fabinski. 8-fight, winning streak there. Then USADA starts testing, and we've got, all of a sudden, he loses to a guy in Nardiev who I think took that fight on super short notice and was a massive underdog. So we're dealing with a 40-year-old fighter basically right now who's coming off a loss, who's coming off a surgery, and who's coming off a PED suspension, and now he's being tested for PEDs regularly. He's not going to be able to use them. He's 13 years older than Shavkat Rakhmonov. He's at a 10-inch reach disadvantage. He's at a 7-inch height disadvantage. And if you want to pile on all that shit on top of that, this guy Rakhmonov's a fucking killer. Yes. He is one of the best prospects in any weight class, in any division in the UFC right now. This guy is fucking scary. 13-0, the fighting pride of Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan, stand up. You got a future potential, belt challenger here in Rakhmonov. Super good all around. Slick submissions, throws with crazy power, has great conditioning, 100% finish rate. We don't have much statistics on Rakhmonov because it's only one fight. But when Rakhmonov was scheduled to make his debut, they had set him up against Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Dude, I think Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos is 9-3 in the UFC. They don't send you to a guy that's 9-3 in the UFC for your debut unless they're expecting you to climb that ladder really quickly. Dos Santos had to pull out of that fight. They gave him another opponent. I don't remember who that opponent was. That guy dropped off, and then he got Cowboy Oliveira, a guy who's 11-8 in the UFC, who's fought everybody, who's a super tough opponent. And Rakhmonov got him out of there in the first round, man. The line is wide. He probably opened up around -170 or something like that, maybe even less than that. It's already up around -240. There's a perfectly good reason for it. This guy is a super hot prospect. I expect him to roll here. There are just so many red flags on Prazeres that I'm not even going to get into what he does well or what he's done well in the UFC. We know that the guy's won a ton of fights, but the red flags are sticking out. He's going to try to grapple fuck Shavkat, but Shavkat's got one of the best guillotine chokes in the welterweight division. This is going to be Shavkat by murder. I don't see it happening any other way. If Prazeres wins this fight, I would be absolutely shocked.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree, and that's going to be a bet that I have. I bet this fight like a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about it. It was sitting at minus 182. I put 2 units on it. Probably should have went a little bit heavier on it. Now we see him as, a lot of money's coming in on him. You can still get minus 220. I believe that's on FanDuel, which is pretty good in my opinion. But we now see him at minus 260, minus 250, minus 265. And honestly, throughout the week, I see this line getting wider and wider and wider. People are going to be putting them in their parlays. And I mean, I can't say I disagree. I mean, Michel Prazeres, like if this fight was, a couple of years ago, before the layoff, before the suspension, for all that, maybe you give him a shot, but he's just, so many red flags, like you mentioned, the reach, the height, the age. And on top of that, you mentioned it, Shavkat is an absolute animal. And I like him to win this fight quite a bit. So I feel like the first round could be a little bit iffy. Prazeres, he does have really good wrestling, but man, he's going to be at such a big size disadvantage. It's hard to see him having a lot of success. And even then, like you mentioned, Shavkat has a very good ground game, a very, very good get-up game. I've seen him get multiple reversals and sweeps, and we saw Ismail Nardiev sweep and reverse Prazeres like 3 times in that fight, which is a huge red flag because Nardiev, he's not great. He's not great. He's cut. So, I like Shavkat here. I do have a play on him, and I'm looking to potentially add on maybe a parlay piece with him, or maybe just play the money line a little bit more. Inside the distance is very interesting because Prazeres, he has never been knocked out. He has never been submitted in a good 29 fights. But again, he's 40 years old, coming off of a layoff, coming off of surgery. And again, Shavkat does have a 100% finish rate, so I can see a finish here. I'm going to say like a third round finish for Shavkat. I don't think he's going to get him out of there early, but I do think as Prazeres slows down, as Shavkat stuffs these takedowns, as he does get back up, I do think the cardio is going to kind of like the Nardiev fight where Prazeres did slow down, gas out a ton. I think it's going to happen. I do think that Shavkat does finish him probably by some type of knockout. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this fight. I'm very high on Shavkat. I think he should win. I think it's a very winnable fight for him. And I do think he will be moving up the rankings very, very soon.
This is a great setup for him. And I think, frankly, the UFC is a little bit mad at Prazeres about the PEDs and stuff like that and the time off. So this is the kind of fight when you want to show an older gentleman the door. You give him a guy like Rakhmonov who's going to go in there and do his thing. This is bad for Prazeres. This is not going to end well for him, I don't think, man. This is a bad matchup for him.
Yeah, I definitely agree. They open up the fight, doesn't go to decision at minus 140. So I think you'll probably get that under around like plus or minus 110, minus 115, minus 120 around there, which is not horrible. But like I said, Prazeres has never been finished yet. So this would have to be the first time, which I kind of do think Shavkat does get it done inside the distance. But rather than messing around with the props, I'm probably just going to, like I said, I played him straight already, and I might throw him into a parlay potentially if I do find another parlay piece, or may just add on to the money line bet there. We got Billy in the chat. What's up, Billy? What up, Brady and Weezy? Fire background. Yeah, shout out to Big Show Picks. Big Show Picks made this background for me, so appreciate you, Big Show Picks. And we do have over 100 in here. Thank you guys for hanging out on a Sunday and also on Father's Day. Shout out to all the fathers out there. Happy Father's Day to you. And thank you guys for hanging out on a Sunday. As always, we go live every week, 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Brand new show. Just started it 2 weeks ago, and I'm loving it personally. Hopefully you guys love it. I know Uncle Weezy loves it as well. It's great to get into the stats. It's great to dig in balls deep as always. And if you guys could hit the like button, let's try to get to 100 likes by the time the show's over. That would be very, very sweet. So we'll get to the next fight here, and we have a very good fight. A very good fight. Two guys that are very good. I think it's a very well-matched fight. Hani Barcelos going against Timur Valiev. We have Barcelos, who is 5'7", 34 years old, 67-inch reach. going against Valiev, who is 31 years old, 5'6", 67-inch reach. So in terms of the tail of the tape, pretty similar. Valiev is going to be a couple years younger, and Valiev is going to be at about an inch of height disadvantage there. Taking a look at their last couple fights, we had Barcelos beat Khalid Taha. He beat Syed Nurmagomedov, Carlos Watchin, Chris Gutierrez, and Kurt Hollaball. 3 of those 5 coming by finish. His last 2 won by decision. And I think he's on like a 9-fight win streak, something like that as well. So he's definitely been on a roll. And Valiev, of course, he beat Martin Day in his last fight. Martin Day, remind you, he did go 0-5 with Contender Series and UFC combined. And then he got knocked out by Trevin Jones. That turned to a no contest. I believe Trevin Jones did pop for that marijuana, but we all saw it happen. We all saw he got knocked out, and a very interesting fight there. I believe he was like the second biggest underdog or second biggest favorite on that card against Trevin Jones. I think that was that Maria Agapova card, believe it or not, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, he did lose as a big favorite there. But yeah, interesting fight here. Like I said, I think both guys are phenomenal. Raoni Barcelos, I think he's very, very underrated, and I'm really curious to get into the stats on this one.
That was definitely the same card that Valiev got knocked out by Trevin Jones in the first fight of the night, and then later on Agapova. That was a disaster for me on DraftKings that night when I got rinsed proper. Got everything wrong that night. But these are 2 great fighters, man. This is going to be probably my favorite fight of the card. 2 great mixed martial artists here with a really well-rounded skill set, no weaknesses in their games. If we look at the experience numbers, very similar here. These guys really don't lose fights. About 210 minutes of cage time for Valiev, 171 for Barcelos, an average fight time right around 10 minutes. Average or the career length about the same. Valiev 1 more year of career and about 3 more fights. They've been just about equally as busy. Barcelos with a little more UFC experience, 60 minutes of cage time as compared to 22 for Valiev. Average fight time right about the same. We see Barcelos, 50% finish rate overall, 13% by sub, 50% by KO for a 63 overall percent finish rate, while Valiev at 41% overall, 29 by KO, 12 by sub. Raoni Barcelos' only career loss came by submission, while Valiev has never theoretically been finished, but he did get knocked out by Trevin Jones. And since Trevin Jones didn't test positive for performance-enhancing substances, it's good to know that Valiev has been knocked out before. That being said, he was kicking his ass for the first 8 minutes of that fight. And, it looked like the fight actually could have been stopped. But credit to the referee for letting Jones go keep continuing, and he landed that left hook, the same exact lead left hook that he knocked out his next opponent with, Trevin Jones. That dude might be for real. But if we look at the numbers here, we see Barcelos 5.6 out of 10.6 for 53% striking accuracy, while Valiev 5.5 out of 7.69 for a 71% striking accuracy. The knockdowns per 15 minutes, 0.68 for Valiev, 0.5 for Barcelos. So both of these guys have shown some power. Valiev has been knocked down once in 34 significant strikes landed against by Trevin Jones. So that's a high ratio, but that, this is in 2 fights. So can't read too much into a 3% ratio against there. For the grappling stats, we know that Valiev against Martin Day really went to his grappling, 4 out of 6 takedowns, 66% takedown percentage. He averages 2.73 per 15 minutes and is averaging 51.55% control time. All of that really did come from the Day fight, where he used his wrestling to dominate. He's not going to be able to do that against Barcelos. Barcelos, 85% takedown defense and a fantastic ground game in his own right. So if Valiev does try to take down Barcelos, I think he's going to find himself in some trouble, as Barcelos does have a great ground game. Anyway, 56% takedown accuracy for Barcelos, 66 for Valiev. Both these guys averaging over 2 takedowns per 15 minutes. Barcelos does go for submissions. Barcelos out controlling his opponents 28% to 4%. So he's definitely not getting controlled in there. And it's the same thing for Valiev in his 2 fights, 51% control time for, only 4.7 against. So both these guys are used to controlling their opponents in the cage. But where we see the big difference here is in the strength of schedule, okay? 1.33 ratio for Barcelos, but only 2.8 total fights. So he's not fighting experienced competition, while for Timur Valiev, a 0.25 ratio. So nothing impressive there. His only win comes against an opponent who was 0-4 in the UFC, Martin Day. So, Barcelos, definitely the strength of schedule advantage. Barcelos is going to be probably the slightly more powerful striker, but the numbers are showing an advantage for Valiev. The numbers can't tell us too much because we only have 2 UFC fights for Timur and only 5 for Barcelos. But we do know that these guys are both very well-rounded. They both have a lot of different ways to win. And they're both, because they're well-rounded, this should be a really good fight. The one difference that I'm seeing is that Barcelos just doesn't seem to literally be weak anywhere. I don't see any weaknesses anywhere in this guy's game. I'm a big fan of his. I actually have him in a parlay with Shavkat that I just got for 1 unit. I'm leaning Barcelos here. I'm a big fan of his. But really, the data's not showing us that much because there's not a whole lot of UFC experience for either of these guys. Which way are you leaning on this one?
Yeah, like I said, I think Barcelos is extremely underrated fighter. I think he does have that top 10 potential for sure. I think he's ranked like 17th right now. The only thing about that is the guy is 34 years old, so he is getting up there. So if he's going to make a run, it's got to be right now. And yeah, I think he does get it done here against Timur Valiev. And you mentioned there's not much in terms of the stats of Valiev. We only seen him in those 2 fights against Jones and Martin Day, which Barcelos would destroy both of them pretty easily. But I see a lot of holes in the game of Valiev, at least in terms of the tape. You take a look at it, and he does get taken down quite a bit. He gets taken down very easily. With that said, his get-up game is very, very good, but I have seen him stuck on his back at points, and I do think that's where the fight's going to be won and lost. Barcelos, his wrestling is very, very good. Very, very good. His striking is very good as well. He's dangerous. He has pop on his punches. And then his ground game is phenomenal. So I think that's where the fight's going to be won and lost. I think the striking will actually be somewhat competitive. I do think that Barcelos is the harder hitter. But I think when it does get down to the mat, we're going to see who the much better fighter is. And I do think it is Barcelos. I can see him getting multiple takedowns, getting some control time. I don't know if he gets a submission, but I do think he's going to rack up the takedowns, control time, and win the fight. I want to say by decision. But yeah, I do like Barcelos myself. I think you pointed out the strength of schedule is huge in favor of Barcelos. He's fought the much better level of competition, especially in the UFC. And I think the ground game is going to be the difference here. I'm not saying Timur Valiev has a bad ground game or nothing like that. He has a very good ground game, a very good get-up game. It's just I have seen him taken down a lot more than I'd like to. And I do think Barcelos' grappling is on a completely different level. So give me Barcelos here. We'll take a look at where the odds are at for this one. He is one of the biggest favorites on the card, sitting at -240 on some books, -230, -225. The fight goes to decision is sitting at -190. Fight doesn't go to decision is at +150. Kind of leaning towards the fight goes to decision here, but I wouldn't be shocked if there was a finish. I do like Barcelos. For me, potential parlay piece. I do want to see the weigh-ins and all that, see how they do look. But I do think Barcelos is the real deal. Somebody said in the chat a little bit ago, like, I wish this guy was a couple of years younger because, man, this guy has so much potential. There's not really a hole in this guy's game. This guy is extremely well-rounded, and I do think he gets it done over Timur Valiev. With that said, I think Valiev's the real deal as well. I think he's very good himself. I think this is a very well-matched fight. Very, in a way, competitive fight, but I do think Barcelos with the takedowns, the control time, I do think he's going to win it, and I say by decision as well.
Brady, just one thing I wanted to bring up is, a lot of people haven't really seen much of Barcelos yet, and Valiev's a really good fighter, So the weird thing here is like, for a guy that's not even top 15 in Barcelos to open as a -220 favorite against a guy like Valiev, who's a damn good fighter, it goes to show you how much respect Barcelos is getting from the bookies and from the sharps. This guy is the real deal. He is very good. This is a super tough matchup, but the fact that he's -200 goes to show you that the people who are really analyzing this guy, they don't see any weaknesses in Barcelos' game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see one either. Somebody said he doesn't have the best cardio. I think his cardio is fine. It's not nothing terrible to really worry about here. But yeah, potential parlay piece for me. I know you pulled the trigger on it. I may or may not. But yeah, I do think he's a solid play. Minus 230, not terrible. I'm curious to see where the line goes. I'm curious to see if there's any love for the Valiev side because, like I said, Valiev he's legit as well. He's a very good fighter. So I'm curious to see if people are going to take that angle. But for me, I'm going to take Barcelos for the win there. All right, next we have a very exciting fight. Renato Moicano going against Jay Herbert. We have Moicano, who is 32 years old, 5'11", 72-inch reach. We have Herbert, who is 33 years old, 6'1", 77-inch reach. So he's going to have a 5-inch reach advantage. We'll take a look at the last couple fights. So Herbert made his UFC debut against Francisco Trinaldo. I had a bet on Jay Herbert, and I was feeling great. I was feeling great going into that third round. In terms of live betting, I think the guy was at like minus 1,000 just about. And then out of nowhere, he gets clipped and knocked out cold against Trinaldo. That was the fight where Dan Hardy got really upset. I think it was against Herb Dean. Got really upset, was starting to yell at Herb Dean. Kind of a controversial stoppage because, yeah, it should have been stopped like right away. But regardless, he did get knocked out there. And as far as Moicano, speaking of getting knocked out, that's what this guy does. He gets knocked out a ton. You see it there, Rafael Fiziev in a fight where I was pretty high on the under 2.5 in that spot. It did work out. I think Fiziev got that win in, I want to say, the first round. And then he did sub Damir Hadzovic in a fight where I think he subbed him in like less than a minute. He took him down and the fight was over shortly after. And then he got knocked out by the Korean Zombie, got knocked out by Jose Aldo, and then he beat Cub Swanson by submission. So what I kind of see with these last 5 fights is Moicano is getting knocked out, but he's getting knocked out by some pretty legit fighters. Getting knocked out by Rafael Fiziev is nothing to hang your hat on. Korean Zombie, nothing, not terrible. And then Jose Aldo, again, not terrible at all. So I'm curious to see the stats on this one. I know we don't have much of a sample size for Jay Herbert, but we'll talk about it. But I think it could be a potential violent spot here.
No question. Renato Moicano, 4 career losses, 3 by knockout, 1 by sub. So this guy's been finishing all of his losses. And then we look at Jai Herbert, 90% finish rate. 8 of his 10 wins by knockout, 1 of his 10 wins by submission. Jai Herbert isn't going to submit Moicano, but the knockout path to victory is definitely there. Moicano, 19 professional fights. Herbert, 12, 14-4-1 for Moicano, 10-2 for Herbert. About 30 minutes more in the professional cage for Moicano. Both of these guys have average fight times below 8 minutes. And we got an 11-year career for Moicano, 6 years for Herbert. So Herbert's probably been a little bit busier during the time, but not much. And then we see Moicano, 10 UFC fights, Jay Herbert, only 1. So that's where we're going to see the level of competition difference that these guys have fought. But, we have to remember, Jai Herbert fought Francisco Trinaldo. That's a hell of a way to be welcome to the UFC. Trinaldo's got over 20 UFC fights, I think. I remember doing the data entry on him, and man, there's a ton of it. The guy's beaten a lot of guys, and he's got a really good record. I think he's something like 16-7 in the UFC. So the fact that he got, he did really well against Trinaldo, and it looked like he was on his way to winning that fight. And that shot that knocked him down was just weird. I mean, he got hit like up here. So it seemed like a bit of a fluke that Trinaldo got to him, but anyway, if we look at the stats here, we don't have much for Herbert, so I'll kind of go through Moicano. 46% striking accuracy, not a ton of power, 0.23 knockdown, 0.23% knockdown per significant strike landed ratio at 0.18 knockdowns per 15 minutes. He does have a 65% striking defense, so that's very good. And probably some of that is attributed to the fact that he is kind of tall for the division, but Herbert's 2 inches taller than him and has a 5-inch reach advantage. So Moicano does have that nice striking defense, but he's chinny, and Jai Herbert's definitely a guy that can put you on your ass. So I definitely see a path to victory for Herbert in terms of knocking Moicano out. And then obviously Moicano is a world champion Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. The guy is absolutely legit on the ground. 7 of his 14 professional wins coming by submission, and he is a good boxer too. A lot of people forget. I believe Renato Moicano has a win over Calvin Kattar in a fight that was almost entirely a boxing match. Yeah, he beat Kattar in a boxing match. I'm looking at the advanced stats right here. Moicano, when he beat Kattar, landed 116 significant strikes to Kattar's 41. Yeah. So anybody who thinks that this guy's just going to go in there and get his face boxed off, that's not entirely true. And yes, he is a guy that's been knocked down. He is a guy that's been finished by knockout. But this guy went 3 rounds with Jeremy Stephens. This guy went 3 rounds with Zubaira Tukhugov. This guy went 3 rounds with Calvin Kattar. He's survived to the bell against some power punchers. So we can't just say all of a sudden automatically if they land on Moicano, he's going down. But lately, he has been chinny. So let's go back. I wanted to illustrate that to you because I think that's kind of important here, that we remember that this guy has fought some competition that, this guy Herbert hasn't seen the kind of guys that Moicano has. Jose Aldo, Chan Sung Jung, Cub Swanson, Fasayev. There's a definite strength of schedule problem here for Herbert. Moicano, 10 UFC fights, only 13 takedown attempts. I don't particularly like that because I'd like to see Moicano go to the wrestling here. It's a place where he does have a huge advantage. I don't know much about Jai Herbert's grappling background, but I do know that in his 10 professional wins, he only has 1 win by submission. So I'm going to just go ahead and assume that Moicano's got the big-time grappling advantage here. But I like seeing a big-time grappling advantage combined with the ability to wrestle and get the fight to the ground. We haven't seen much of that from Moicano. But he does have a 53% takedown percentage, so he's getting more than half of the takedowns that he does attempt. He is averaging more than 1 takedown per 15 minutes, and he is the type of fighter that might only need 1. Yeah. But for a guy that I'd like to see grapple, it bothers me when I look at Moicano's numbers and I see 6% control time and only 3% control time against. That tells me that Moicano, whose strength is grappling, seems to just be happy to stand in the middle of the cage and be a boxer. And it's worked out for him some in the past, but lately he's getting slept. And I don't think that that's a good way for him to fight this fight. I'd like to see him try to take Herbert down, try to close the distance. You got great boxing, but let's use the skill that got you here, and that's your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If we look at the strength of schedule, average opponent that Moicano is facing has a 6.3 win and 4.3 loss record for 10.6 total fights, a 1.47 ratio. So he's definitely fighting great competition. And Herbert has a loss against Trinaldo. The guys that Moicano is losing to, an average record of 5.5 and 2.75 for a 2 ratio, 8.25 total fights. So he's losing definitely to solid fighters. So I see Herbert with the power advantage, and there's a path to victory there because Moicano is chinny. But Moicano's a better boxer than people think he is. And he has survived with power punchers in the past. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if this fight stays on the feet the whole time, that Herbert's necessarily going to win. Moicano has won fights like that, and he's done it against better strikers than Jai Herbert and a guy like Tukhugov and a guy like Kattar. He's beaten both of those guys. So I'd like to see Moicano go to his grappling, but I don't think he has to in order to win the fight. I see why he's a minus 230 favorite, but I would not bet him because all it takes is one well-placed punch to put him on his ass. And that advantage that I really know that he does have, that grappling advantage, I don't see him going with the grappling enough. So I'm not going to bet Moicano at minus 200 or lower, because it just seems like I have to put up too much to get 1 unit back. And I'm not seeing the wrestling and the top control that I'd like to see out of a guy like Moicano to make me feel like he's going to fight like he's minus 200.
Yeah, I mean, you pointed out a bunch of red flags. First of all, first red flag is going to be the chin of Moicano. Second red flag for me is going to be, he has only attempted, 13 takedowns, got 7 of them. So yes, he's having success when he goes to it. It's just not. You don't want to see that. You want to see him attempting more than 13 takedowns, especially in this fight against Herbert, who does have a lot of power. With that said, I'm with you. I think if it does stay standing for 15 minutes, I think that Moicano can very well win this fight. It's just, like you said, it only takes that one punch, and Herbert can definitely crack. 90% finish rate, and Moicano can definitely be cracked. But I think what sticks out to me the most is going to be the level of competition. We saw Herbert just get knocked out by Francisco Trinaldo, where we have Moicano getting knocked out by guys like Rafael Fiziev, guys like the Korean Zombie, guys like Jose Aldo, guys like that. So the level of competition is huge. This is a massive, 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 massive step down in competition, in my opinion. And I think that Moicano should absolutely win this fight. It's just, do I want to lay the minus 230 and trust his chin? No, I do not. Do I want him going out there and striking with Herbert for 15 minutes? No, I do not. I want him to get this fight down to the mat, and seeing that stat of him only attempting 13 takedowns is very, very concerning. But with that said, if he does go to the takedowns, if he does get this down to the mat, I do think he finishes this fight. You mentioned it. His BJJ is phenomenal. He's finished half his wins by submission. I have seen Herbert taken down a few times, actually, so I do think it can be done. It's just you need to go to your wrestling, especially in this fight. So the pick for me is a clear Moicano pick. I think he should absolutely win this fight. But as far as the money line goes, I'll get to the exact money line, Moicano is sitting at minus 240, minus 230, and I agree with it. It's just, do I want to put him in a parlay? Do you want to play him straight where there is that chance that he very well could be knocked out for the 5th time? Something that really stuck out to me is both guys have never, ever lost by decision. We have Moicano, who has 3 knockout losses, 1 submission loss as well. We have Herbert, who has 2 knockout losses. So in a combined, 31 fights, neither guy has lost by decision. So that I'm kind of looking at the fight doesn't go to decision or the under 2.5. Moicano, like you mentioned, has a 50% finish rate, all by submission. So if he wins it, it's probably by submission. Herbert, 90% finish rate, 80 by knockout. So he has a lot of power. Just all adding up to me, and it's kind of looking like a violence bet. So we'll take a look at the fight doesn't go to decision. So they actually open up the fight doesn't go to decision at minus 215. Money's coming in on the fight goes to decision. We now see the fight doesn't go to decision around minus 190. So you got to think they're going to open up the 2.5 rounds under at like minus 160, minus 165. Not horrible. I do think this fight's finishing. Like I said, if this fight goes to the distance, and it's going to be one of these guys' first time they ever lost by decision. 31 fights, neither guy's lost by decision. Could it happen here? Maybe, but I think it's either Moicano gets his fight down to the mat, finds a sub, or Herbert knocks him out at some point. So I wouldn't recommend, throwing Moicano into the parlays. He absolutely should win this fight. It's just the chin that is kind of giving me pause.
With you on that, Kung Dao just said it, lots of recency bias on new prospects, again, going against ranked veterans who are losing the top competition, and this is one of those things, you saw Dan Ige climbing the ladder, and he ran against a guy like Zombie, who had just beaten way better competition than Ige had ever beaten. And even Ige's wins against the top level competition were split decisions. So, this is definitely a step up for Herbert, but the thing that really bothers me is the fact that Moicano is not shooting takedowns. I want to see him wrestle in this fight, but the stats are telling me that I can't count on that. And if I can't count on that, I can't lay minus 200 on a guy that I think maybe wins this fight 51% of the time if it's a striking battle, because it's not enough. I need to think that there's at least a 33% chance that Moicano is going to go out there and wrestle. Because if he does that, then he has a much better chance of getting the fight where he's going to be more comfortable. And when he's comfortable, his opponent's going to be uncomfortable. And sure as shit, when that guy gets the fight on the ground, you don't want Moicano on top of you. That guy's, he's submitting black belts. He's a world champion. So, this is a stay away for me, man. I'm staying away. I think Moicano wins this fight. But you pointed it out. All these guys have never lost by decision, so this could be a great spot for violence. And I see paths to victory for both of these guys.
I mean, kind of looking through the record of Moicano, I can kind of see why the dude, has not went for many takedowns. I mean, Rafael Fiziev, phenomenal takedown defense. Damir Hadzovic, no takedown defense. He took him down and submitted him in 44 seconds. The Korean Zombie, very good takedown defense, very good grappling. Jose Aldo, some of the best takedown defense you'll ever see. Cub Swanson, he took him down. Calvin Kattar, very good takedown defense. Brian Ortega, he actually took down Ortega 2 times. Jeremy Stevens, very good takedown defense. He took him down 2 times. So I'm kind of looking through the record here, and I'm seeing some guys with very good takedown defense. I'm seeing guys that are levels and levels and levels above of a guy like Jay Herbert. So maybe he does go to that wrestling here. I would highly recommend it. And I think if he does, I think a submission is definitely on the table. Like you mentioned, the guy, his grappling is phenomenal. I do think he'll have a big grappling advantage here if he decides to go to it. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting point to bring up there. So we'll get to the next fight here. We have Andre Fili going against Daniel Pineda. We have Fili, who is 30 years old, 5'11", 74-inch reach. Daniel Pineda, 35 years old, 5'7", 69-inch reach. So we actually have a pretty decent sample size in terms of stats for Pineda because he used to fight in the UFC around like 2012, 2013. He had, not the best UFC run in the world. He ended up getting cut and then coming back a couple of years later. But we'll talk about it a little bit. But he went on an absolute run. Like, Pineda looked like a beast. I remember going back and watching tape on the guy, and I was like, my goodness, this is a completely different fighter. And then the guy pops for PEDs. A lot of those wins, they turn into no contest. He comes into the UFC against Herbert Burns, ends up getting the knockout win in a fight where it looked like Herbert Burns had a very, very bad weight cut. Herbert Burns kind of gassed out, and Pineda looked like an absolute killer. And then he went against Cub Swanson, and Pineda, he didn't look like the same fighter. It looked like a completely different fighter between the Herbert Burns fight, between the Kennedy fight, and the fights in the PFL. He looked like a completely different fighter, and he gassed out about after the first round of that fight, ended up getting knocked out by Cub Swanson. So yeah, very interesting fight here. Andre Fili, he did lose to Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell is an absolute beast, no shame in that. He did have a split decision win over Charles Jourdain. He did lose to Sadiq Youssef. He knocked out Shaman Marias, and he did go to decision against Miles Jury, picking up the win there. This fight, I think it's going to be very exciting. I know you're going to touch on it, but Daniel Pineda, in 43 fights, he has a 100% finish rate. I think someone has a good potential of getting finished here. But yeah, I'm curious to see the stats on this one. I think this is going to be a banger of a fight.
And you just took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, think about, 43 professional fights, 27 wins, and having a 100% finish rate. That's crazy. Both of these guys really experienced. Pineda, 35 years old, so he's 5 years older than Fili. And we got a 35-year-old featherweight here. It's not, that's kind of the age where we start shorting featherweights, and saying that they're going to be on the downside of their career. Daniel Pineda, 14-year career, 43 fights, average fight time, 5.34 minutes. I mean, this guy, I've said it before, but, this is a guy who truly fights like he's double parked. I mean, he just gets in, he gets out. And if it means that he's got to lose in 5 minutes or win in 5 minutes, he doesn't care. This guy doesn't get paid by the minute, and he doesn't fucking fight like it. And we got, Fili here, who's actually got more time in the cage in his career in 29 fights than Pineda has in 43. Twice as long average fight time at 10.14 instead of 5.34. But Fili has been fighting since he was 18 years old, with almost a 12-year career, and he's 30 years old. He will be turning 31 here. Just a couple. Actually, his birthday is the day after the fight, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Or no, the day before, because it'll be the 26th. So happy birthday, Andre Fili. So we got 16 fights for Fili in the UFC, 9 for Pineda. A winning record for Fili, slightly losing record for Pineda. Average fight time in the UFC for Pineda, 7.5 minutes, 11.65 for Fili. So 100% finish rate for Pineda, 2/3 by sub, 1/3 by knockout. And we've got for Fili an overall 57% finish rate. He gets it done more often than not by KO. So Andre Fili's had 8 professional losses. 2 of them came by KO, 2 of them came by sub. And we see that Pineda, in his 14 career losses, has been finished by sub 43% of the time, by knockout 21% of the time. So, in Pineda's 14 losses, he's been finished in, I think, probably 9 or 10 of them. If we look at the striking statistics, Fili, 36% striking accuracy, so pretty low. 3.73 landed out of 10.25 attempted. And then we see Pineda 3.41 out of 6.93 for a 49% striking accuracy. Both these guys land some knockdowns, 0.32 per 15 minutes for Fili, 0.22 per 15 minutes for Pineda. Both of these guys get knocked down, but Pineda is showing that he's a lot chinnier in terms of the ratio. At 1.62% of the significant strikes landed against Pineda knock him on his ass, while it's only 0.4% for the strikes landed against Fili. So Fili showing just a little more power and also a little bit better of a chin than Pineda, and also throws a lot more volume. But there's a reason for that, and that's because Pineda's fights, if we look at the grappling stats and we look at the control time and add it up, we see that about 58 to 59% of Daniel Pineda's fights take place on the cage or on the mat, while for Andre Fili, it's about 35%. So Fili does a little more striking in his fights than Pineda does. Daniel Pineda in his 9 fights has attempted 24 takedowns. He's gotten 7 of them, 29% accuracy. While Fili, who we think of as a striker, has attempted 63 takedowns in his 16 fights. So it's about 4 takedown attempts per fight, and he's actually getting about half of them. So for a guy that's training at Team Alpha Male, it's clear that a guy who is a striker first can go to his wrestling when he needs to. In addition to that, he's had a 65% takedown defense, not terrible. He gets taken down 1.61 times per 15 minutes, does Fili. And he's been controlled just a little bit more than he has controlled his opponents at 20% control time against, 15% control time for. Pineda controls his opponents almost 25% of the time, but he gets controlled 34% of the time. If Fili wants to take down Pineda, he can, because Pineda's got 44% takedown defense. That's terrible. Part of that might be, though, because Pineda does not mind being on the ground. He is a very slick submission grappler. So, you see some of these guys that are really great grapplers. They don't care if you take them down. They'd probably rather be on the mat anyway. But I think where Fili will probably be the most comfortable is standing. But this is going to be a brawl, dude. These guys are finishers, especially Pineda. And these guys get finished. So I think a violence bet is an excellent spot here. If we look at the level of competition, there is a big difference. Andre Fili has fought the much tougher level of competition. If we just look at those names, Bryce Mitchell, Charles Jourdain, Sadiq Youssef, Shayman Moraes, Miles Jury, and then you have to go behind that because we're talking 16 fights. So there's 11 more fights behind that where this guy's been fighting a ton of top-level UFC competition. The average record that he's facing is 5.5 wins, 3.75 losses for a 1.48 ratio. And he's losing the guys with an average record of 7.3 wins and 4.3 losses for 11 total fights, while we see that Pineda is beating 1.2 level ratio competition with only 2.75 fights, and he's actually losing the guys with more losses than they have wins. His ratio in his losses is 0.9, and they have an average record of 3.8 wins and 4.2 losses. So Pineda, coming off that PED suspension, 35 years old. USADA's testing him, so he's not going to be able to use those PEDs anymore. Fili has fought the better level of competition. He's good everywhere. As long as Fili can stay out of a submission or not get knocked out in the first 5 or 6 minutes of the fight, I really do see him taking over. I wouldn't mind the 2nd or 3rd round prop on a guy like Fili because he's probably going to finish this fight if he does win it. And Daniel Pineda, he just doesn't go to decision that often, even when he does lose. More than half the time he's getting finished. So I like Fili here, but I think the line's a little bit too wide to bet. Probably the spot that I would encourage the audience to go with here is the under. These guys are both incredible finishers, and just an under in any Daniel Pineda fight is almost always going to work out for you because, this guy's either finishing dudes or he's getting finished. That's the spot that I'm seeing here. Do you agree?
I 100% agree. It kind of reminds me of like the James Rosa fight where, yeah, Rosa probably should win, but James is going to be very dangerous in that first round. Again, Andre Fili, he probably should win. I think he's the much better fighter, but Pineda, he is very, very dangerous, whether it's on the mat. Even on the feet, he's shown some serious power as of late. So I don't know if I want to touch the money line of Fili, but I do think there's probably a better way of betting this fight. So we have Andre Fili, who is, minus 225, minus 230. Some money is pouring in on him. And as I do kind of expect because Pineda, like I said, he has probably one round to get it done. If not, I do think he gasses out and ends up getting finished. But I'm kind of interested in this. And only one book has this thus far. Waiting for my books to open it up. But they actually opened up the fight. Doesn't go to decision line at plus 125, which means under 2.5 is probably going to be opened up around like the plus 140. Plus 150, which is, kind of shocking because, like you said, Pineda, I don't know the last time he's been to decision, but it hasn't been in at least the last 5 fights. He's either going out there and getting a finish, 100% finish rate, or he's getting finished himself. So I will pull up the finish stats here. So Fili has a 57% finish rate, 43% by knockout, and Fili has been knocked out 2 times. He's been submitted twice as well. So a Pineda early finish is definitely on the table. So that's why I wouldn't touch the Fili money line there. So Fili has lost half his fights inside the distance as far as Daniel Pineda. He has been knocked out 3 times, and he has been submitted 6 times as well, for a total of 9 total finish losses for Daniel Pineda. You put them together, 13 total finish losses between the two. And like you said, both guys very, very dangerous. Both guys hit very hard. Pineda, very dangerous early, but as the fight goes on, I do see him slowing down. 35 years old. I don't love that. He's been in a lot of wars. He's been fighting for a long time. No more PEDs. No more PEDs. But he looked horrible in the Cub Swanson fight, man. He looked terrible. It didn't even look like the Pineda that had been, knocking people out in the first round in PFL. It didn't look like the same Pineda against Herbert Burns. It looked like a completely different fighter. I think the age is catching up to him. I think, USADA is catching up to him as well. And I really do think Fili does win this fight. I'm going to say I honestly think he can win in any round, but I'm kind of leaning with you towards like the second or third round. I'd be kind of surprised if it did go to the distance, but if it did, it's probably Fili winning a decision, as Pineda has never shown to be able to win a decision ever in a ton of fight samples. So the look for me is going to be the under 2.5 or fight doesn't go to decision. And I'm kind of shocked that they opened up the fight doesn't go to decision at plus 125. How about you?
I mean, for a guy with a 100% finish rate in Pineda, they say the fight it doesn't go to decision is plus money. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. And and then not only that, you got the PED suspension as a big red flag. You got 35 years old as a big red flag. And as if 35 years old for a featherweight isn't bad enough, it's a 35-year-old featherweight with 43 professional fights. And not only that, the guy's coming off the PED suspension. We talked about it with the Rakhmonov fight with Prazeres. How do you bet these guys? If you did it with Bruno Silva last week, it worked out pretty well for you. He beat the hell out of Turman, but Turman had him in some bad spots. But it's one of those things. Silva's young. This guy Pineda's 35, and he's got a lot of tread on those tires. So. Yeah, dude, I feel like that fight doesn't go to decision is a great line. You don't have to lay as much juice if you were just going to do the straight bet on Fili. And I know a lot of people like Fili here, but you're getting better money on the fight doesn't go to decision. So I think I'd bet that.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the way I'm going to look. Any chance Daniel Pineda or like a Justin James is fighting, I'm going to be taking a look at those unders and the fight doesn't go to decision. It's just the style of the guys. I mean, kill or be killed, and I do think that's what happens this weekend. All right, so next we have a very interesting fight. I know you, Uncle Weezy, did a balls deep breakdown on this one on your channel, so you guys can go check that out on Uncle Weezy's channel, Uncle Weezy on YouTube. But we're going to get into it here. Kennedy and Nzechukwu going against Danilo, Marques. Kennedy, 29 years old, 6'5", 83-inch reach. Marques is 35 years old, 6'6". 77-inch reach, and what sticks out to me right away is going to be the age of Marques. 35 years old. He made his debut at probably like 34 years old. So yeah, late starter for sure. He is 6'6". Like I said, 77-inch reach. So he's going to be at a 6-inch reach disadvantage, a 1-inch height advantage. So we'll take a look at the last couple of fights. Kennedy and Nzechukwu, he did knock out Carlos Ulberg, and believe they got fight of the night where Ulberg absolutely let out the whole gas tank in that first round, and Kennedy and Nzechukwu, was very durable, has great cardio, great output, ended up finishing him, I believe, in that second round, if I'm not mistaken, and then he did win against Darko Stosic in a fight where he got kicked in the nuts like 3 times. I think the ref took like 2 points in that fight. Very weird fight there. And then a fight against Paul Craig where he was winning the entire fight. He was winning 14 minutes of the fight up until the last minute. Paul Craig does what Paul Craig does and gets a last-minute finish on Kennedy and Nzechukwu. He did fight out of a ton of submissions in that fight, but did get caught in that last minute. And then as far as Danilo Marques, he did make his UFC debut against Khadis Ibragimov, who could be one of the worst, if not the worst, fighter to ever reach the UFC. I believe Khadis did go 0-3 or 0-4 in the UFC. And then against Mike Rodriguez, somebody that has literally, I think he has like a 32% takedown defense, and he's been submitted a million times. But he did submit him. Interesting fight here. Interesting fight. 2 guys that typically you're probably going to look to fade. But with that said, Kennedy and Nzechukwu, he's making some massive improvements, training at a very good camp. You see these improvements. You see the improvements with the striking. You see that he's making improvements with the takedown defense, the grappling. So curious to see your thoughts on this one, Weezy. I was not able to watch your video yet. I'll watch it after this, but let's see what you got here.
Yeah, fascinating fight, you guys. And this is your classic striker versus grappler matchup here. You don't want to even break it down any other way. One of the stats that you won't find on this page, when I was doing I did the breakdown on my channel of this fight, I watched tape on Danilo, and the first 3 fights that I watched of his were the Rodriguez fight, the Ibragimov fight, and the fight against Myron Dennis that took place in LFA. And in the first 30 seconds of all 3 of those fights, he shot a takedown. I believe against Rodriguez, he shot a takedown 8 seconds into the fight. Against Ibragimov, it was like 15 seconds into the fight. And against Myron Dennis, it was maybe 20 seconds into the fight. Danilo Marques knows what he is. He is a grappler. He trains with Damian Maia at Vila de Luta Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And Nzechukwu fights at Fortis. He's got Saif Sayoud, one of the most entertaining cornermen in the UFC, in his corner. And Nzechukwu's measurables are ridiculous. An 83-inch reach is freakish. Add to the fact that he's a southpaw. He has very heavy hands. He has incredible off-the-charts conditioning for a light heavyweight. And he just has an athletic build. He's really a rare athlete. While Marques is 6'6", 77-inch reach, 13 professional fights, only a 7-year MMA career, which means he took his first MMA fight at the age of 28. So he was definitely a late starter here. Nzechukwu, 5 UFC fights, including the 2 Contender Series fights, and we got Marques with 2. If we look at how these guys finish fights, Nzechukwu, 63% of his wins by KO, 0% by sub. If Nzechukwu is going to knock you or finish you, he's going to do it with a knockout. Marques, interestingly enough, has a 45% sub rate and a 36% knockout rate. So 81% finish rate, but you would think the way Marques fights that he would be getting way more submissions, but he does have more than one way to finish you. In terms of how Nzechukwu loses fights, he's got 1 loss, and it came by sub to Paul Craig. And if you go back and you watch that fight, it's the exact same scenario as the Hill Craig fight. Nzechukwu starts landing strikes on Craig. Craig tries to take him down. He's unsuccessful. He just pulls guard like he did against Jamal Hill, and then he gets Nzechukwu in that same armbar that he got Hill in. Hill's elbow popped, and Nzechukwu's elbow was probably this close to popping, but he was so strong he just yanked it out of there. And then wound up beating the hell out of him for most of the rest of the fight until Paul Craig pulled guard again with 90 seconds left, wound up sweeping Nzechukwu, getting on top, and then he locked up that trademark triangle that it only takes about 3 seconds for people to tap when Craig gets you in that. So definitely a path to victory for Danilo Marques via the grapple fuck and submission, and definitely a path to victory for Nzechukwu by knockout, because that's what these guys do well. You're not going to see Marques try to stand with Nzechukwu, and you're not going to see Nzechukwu willingly go to the ground with Marques. This is going to be a very clear striker versus grappler matchup. 43% striking accuracy for Nzechukwu, 88% striking accuracy for Marques. He only lands 1.81 strikes per minute, though. So those are all ground strikes that he's landing. He's not concerned with striking at all. When he's gotten to the UFC, what he's done is he entirely tries to win the fight with his grappling. It's exactly what he's going to do in this fight. So one of the interesting things about Nzechukwu, right? Let's look at the takedown defense, because that's probably the most important stat that we're going to break down in this fight. Marques is going to try to get Nzechukwu down. Can Nzechukwu stop him? 78.79% takedown defense for Nzechukwu. That means 26 out of 33 he's defended successfully. Here's the other thing. In 5 fights, Nzechukwu has had 33 takedowns attempted against him. So the style of fight that Danilo Marques is going to bring is not going to be unfamiliar to Kennedy. This is how everybody else has tried to fight him too, especially Paul Craig, who I believe was 1 of 12 or 1 of 13 on his takedown attempts. But the key number here is that Kennedy has been taken down 7 times in 5 fights. However, only 3.15% control time against for Nzechukwu. So I got my little calculator here. If we take 54.45 minutes, and then we multiply that point times 0.0315, we see that Kennedy's opponents have controlled him a total of 1.71 minutes in the cage, and that's on 7 takedowns. So what does that tell us? When you take down Kennedy, he's got an amazing get-up game. He gets up immediately. You're probably not even getting 10 seconds of control time per takedown on Kennedy. At least Paul Craig hasn't. Darko Stosic took down Kennedy a couple of times, but got no control time. And then I believe Anton Berzin shot some takedowns, but he was also unsuccessful on the Contender Series fight. So Nzechukwu, when you're seeing that striker versus grappler, you want to see a guy who has really good takedown defense. Check. You want to see a guy that when he does get taken down, he gets back up quickly and won't let this guy lay on top of him. Check. All that really does work out. So, but if we look at Danilo Marques, he's gotten 8 out of 23 takedown attempts. So 11 and a half takedown attempts per fight for Marques, 4 takedowns per fight for Marques, 4.83 takedowns per 15 minutes. So, I mean, like, the numbers are crystal clear here. Striker versus grappler. Kennedy shows the kind of statistics that you would like to see the striker display in order to feel good about the striker winning the matchup. I'm leaning Kennedy here. I can't quite get there on a bet yet, because I do know that Marques is just going to go over and over and over again for the takedown. If he's unsuccessful, he'll keep trying. I think a great spot for this fight, because Kennedy has excellent takedown defense, a great get-up game, and fantastic conditioning, and that because Marques, in order for him to win the fight, he's going to have to pressure Kennedy, and he's going to have to attempt a lot of offensive takedowns. I see Marques gassing out if he can't get the submission earlier here, because the type of fight he's going to have to fight in order to make Kennedy uncomfortable is going to be exhausting. There's going to be a lot of offensive wrestling involved. There's going to be a lot of trying to hold him down, and there's going to be a lot of cage and grapple work. That's not going to affect Kennedy. He's got great conditioning. So I am getting there. I'm leaning Kennedy. I love the potential 3rd round prop for Kennedy. I think if Kennedy finishes this fight, it'll be in the 3rd round, and you might be able to get 10, 12, 14 to 1 on that. But if we look at the, we went over the strength of schedule. Neither one of these guys is fighting killers, but Nzechukwu has actually fought the better brand of competition. So I see a conditioning advantage for Kennedy. I see a strength of schedule advantage for Kennedy. I see a youth advantage for Kennedy. I see a measurables advantage for Kennedy. I see a striking and power advantage for Kennedy, but I do see a very clear grappling advantage, a very good offensive wrestling game from Marques, and a willingness to go to it over and over again. So I could see Marques winning 2 out of 3 rounds of this fight and, squeaking out a decision. But, it's going to be exhausting for him. And I am leaning Kennedy here.
Yeah, I mean, a very interesting fight. So I went into taping this fight, actually potentially looking at taking a shot on Danilo Marques, but after getting into the Kennedy and Nzechukwu tape, and I mean, his takedown defense is phenomenal. Yes, he got taken down 4 times by Darko Stosic, but like you mentioned, he got back up right away. Darko did have 2 minutes of control time in that fight, but he's really hard to take down, 78% takedown defense. And if you get him down, good luck holding him down. The guy's very strong. The guy's very big, and he does get up right away. Yeah, Paul Craig, yeah, like you mentioned it, Paul Craig shot for 16 takedowns. He got one of them. That one takedown he got, he was able to get back up right away. But yeah, 16 takedown attempts against Kennedy and Nzechukwu here. And I think a lot of people are just going to look at, the fights and see that, oh, Paul Craig submitted him. Maybe Danilo Marques can as well. But, man, I'm here to tell you that I don't think Marques is that good. You take a look at his 2 wins, and they're against, like, the bottom of the barrel in the UFC. Khadis Ibragimov, somebody that is cut, somebody that went, I believe, 0 for 4 in the UFC. Mike Rodriguez, who, if he's not cut yet, the cut is coming very soon. Mike Rodriguez, who has a 41% takedown defense. So, yes, he's going to have a lot of success against him. And the thing about Kennedy that I do like is you mentioned all of it. He's going to have a youth advantage. I think that's huge. He's going to have a massive, massive cardio advantage. You take a look at some of the tape on Marques in the regional scene, and this guy's not great. I mean, his wrestling's not great. The cardio is not great. The striking is definitely not great. But it looks like he's making improvements, which is weird because he is 35. But he's looking good against Khadis Ibragimov. He's looking good against Mike Rodriguez. So it's kind of hard to gauge where he's really at. But yeah, you mentioned it. Like if Marques is not able to get down Kennedy, I do think it's going to really tire him out. We see it time and time again where these fighters do go for takedowns. They're not able to get them. It really is taxing on your gas tank, especially for Marques, because you take a look at a lot of his fights. When he's not getting the takedown, he gasses out hard. The guy has about round and a half of cardio. And I do think it's very, very hard to take down Kennedy. And I think it's even harder for him to get held down. So, yes, he did get submitted by Paul Craig. But, man, the takedown defense is just so good. The cardio advantage, the striking advantage, all these advantages for Kennedy. And I actually do like him to win here. So I'm going to take Kennedy and Nzechukwu for the win. And we take a look at the line. And Marques did open up a favorite, but the line has flipped, at least on one book. Kennedy and Nzechukwu is now minus 115. He's minus 110 on some books. So it's mostly a pick 'em here. I'm curious to see where the line goes. So far from the betting community, I do see some money coming in on the Kennedy side, but I do see some people on Marques as well. So, yeah, very interesting fight. I think it's a fun clash of styles, striker versus grappler. But honestly, I think Marques is first round submission or bust, because if he does, have success in that first round, what's his gas tank going to look like in the second? Because I can assure you that Kennedy's gas tank is going to be on point for the entire fight. And if he does not get finished in that first round by submission, I do see him taking over in that second and third and probably even getting a finish as well. So you mentioned the fight doesn't go to decision, and they are all over it, minus 230. So the under 2.5 is probably at minus 210. They probably even set the over under at 1.5. So I don't know if I'd touch it there from that standpoint, but I do as well see this fight ending at the distance, and I do see as well a Kennedy second or third round knockout.
Completely on that. Marquez's wrestling isn't bad, but Nzechukwu's takedown defense is really good. We know that it's really hard to take down tall dudes, and Nzechukwu kind of fills that. He's 6'5", but with the high top fade that he was rocking in the last fight, man, he might be about 6'9". So this is going to be a really interesting fight. I really had fun breaking this one down on my channel because I think there's a lot of really interesting angles and the striker versus grappler numbers that you want to see in order to make that a compelling matchup. They're all available in this fight. And, I like Kennedy here. I haven't went, neck deep into the pool there yet, but I think I might bet him.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not sure where that line's going to go, but we'll definitely see as the fight week goes on. I'm curious to see what other people think of this fight, because like you said, it's one of the most compelling fights on this card, just based off of it being a striker versus grappler, and it has all the stats right there. So curious to see that one, but we'll move to the co-main event. Before we do so, if you guys can leave a like on the video, I think we're sitting at about 70 likes. Let's get those likes up, hopefully get close to 100, maybe even 100 by the time we get out of here. We have about 112 watching. Thank you guys so much. Going live on Sunday, every Sunday, 7:00 p.m., 7:15 p.m. Eastern time. breaking down the stats, going balls deep, and digging in. So co-main event here. Interesting co-main event. I mean, should be a fun fight. Tanner Boser, Ovince St. Preux. We have Boser, who is 29 years old, 6'2", 75-inch reach. St. Preux is 38 years old, 6'3", 80-inch reach. This fight is going to be at heavyweight, which Ovince St. Preux, we just saw him fight at heavyweight against Ben Rothwell a couple fights ago. OSP is going to have a 5-inch reach advantage, and Boser is going to be younger by 9 years. So a couple things to point out there. So we'll take a look at the last couple of fights. We have Tanner Boser lost to Ilir Latifi in a split decision. A lot of people thought he won that fight. He did outland Latifi in terms of the numbers, something crazy like 45-5, something like that. And then he lost to Andrei Arlovsky, another fight that a lot of people thought he won, where he did outland Arlovsky 2-1 in that fight. He did knock out Rafael Pessoa. He did knock out Philippe Lanz, and he did lose a decision to Ciryl Gane. As far as OSP, he did get knocked out by Jamal Hill. He knocked out Alonzo Menefield, split decision loss. That was that heavyweight fight against Ben Rothwell. A submission win against Michel Nzechukwu, and then a submission loss to Nikita Krylov. So, yeah, really curious to see the stats on this one. I know there's some things that stick out to me, but let's see if you see the same things.
Yeah, this is another interesting one. It reminds me a lot of the Moicano Herbert fight in that, you'd feel real comfortable about Moicano winning the fight if he would just go to his wrestling. And it's the same thing for me here. If Ovince went to his wrestling, he would murder Tanner Boser. But we can look at Ovince St. Preux in the UFC, 23 fights, only 44 takedown attempts, and only 14 takedowns. So he averages less than one takedown per 15 minutes. And, what's even more infuriating is if we saw what Paul Craig did to Jamal Hill in the last fight, you say, oh, okay. If you want to beat Jamal Hill, maybe if you're not, successful in the first takedown attempt, maybe you just pull guard or do whatever you need to do to get the fight to the ground, right? Because you want to win. So when Ovince St. Preux is fighting a powerful striker in Jamal Hill, how many takedowns does he attempt against Jamal Hill? Of course, 0. Fucking 0. Why? Why would you attempt 0 takedown attempts against a guy who's going to box your face off? Well, because you're Ovince St. Preux and you have horseshit fight IQ and you don't use your wrestling, even though that Von Preux choke that he has is so nasty. If he went for more takedowns, he could get that thing pretty much on anybody that tried to wrap up a guillotine on him. But he doesn't try takedown attempts. Both these dudes are veterans. 40 fights for St. Preux, 28 for Boser. 12-year career for St. Preux, 8-year career for Boser. 350 minutes in the cage for both of them. Boser's fights are longer at 12.64 minutes as opposed to about 9 for St. Preux. And if we look at the UFC competition, big advantage for a guy like St. Preux who's been fighting high-level competition much longer than Tanner Boser has. 23 UFC fights for St. Preux, and prior to that, he was fighting in Strikeforce, while Tanner Boser has 6 UFC fights. So we see 3 times as much time in the UFC cage for St. Preux as opposed to Boser. So, we've got a huge reach advantage. St. Preux's a southpaw. The fact that he's moving up to heavyweight isn't a big deal here because Tanner Boser isn't. Tanner Boser could probably make 205 if he wanted to. So Ovince St. Preux will probably be bigger than Tanner Boser. So this really doesn't matter that this is up to heavyweight right now. We see the finishing rates on these guys. St. Preux is a great finisher, 80% finish rate overall. 20 out of his 25 wins he has finished, 48% by knockout, 32% by sub. And Tanner Boser, a pretty good finisher in his own right, with a 64% overall finish rate. And even in the UFC, out of his 3 wins, he's finished 2 of them by knockout. Very impressive. While Ovince St. Preux, with that 80% finish rate, look at this. In the UFC, against tougher competition, he's actually got an 84% finish rate. So St. Preux finishes fights when he wins. We see how they lose. St. Preux 15 fights, so he's had 3 losses by submission and 3 losses by KO. And in Tanner Boser's 8 losses, he's only been finished once, and it was by KO. So we got Boser with a 53% striking accuracy, Ovince with a 44% striking accuracy. Boser definitely throws more volume at 8 strikes per minute as opposed to St. Preux 6. Tanner Boser, the much more efficient and defensively sound striker. as he is landing 4.21 per minute and only absorbing 2.26. While if we look at St. Preux on the feet, 2.62 he lands, but he absorbs 3.48. So Tanner Boser showing a 64% striking defense. That's excellent. While St. Preux not good with 44.59%. And we also see that St. Preux has been knocked down a little bit, 0.53% knockdown per total significant strikes absorbed at 0.28 knockdowns per 15 minutes. And Tanner Boser, even though he's a heavyweight and had 6 fights, he's never been knocked down in the UFC. Tanner Boser is not a grappler. 6 UFC fights, 0 takedown attempts. And Tanner Boser has been lucky thus far in the UFC because he's not a great defensive grappler, but yet in 6 UFC fights, he's only had 5 takedowns attempted against him. 2 of them have been completed. I believe they were both by Latifi.
Yep.
And Latifi wound up getting that win because he got a bunch of control time against Tanner Boser, which is why I was saying when we started the breakdown, I would really love to see if Ovince St. Preux was trying offensive takedowns here. I would feel a whole hell of a lot better about him winning this fight, but he just doesn't. Tanner Boser, 60% takedown defense. Ovince St. Preux, 68. Ovince St. Preux sees about 3 takedown attempts against him per fight, but he won't be seeing any in this fight, so we won't have to worry about that. St. Preux getting controlled almost twice as much time as he's controlling his opponents. Tanner Boser only controls his opponents 1.16% of the time, and he gets controlled 9.44% of the time. So Boser can be controlled, but he's been lucky thus far in the UFC that his opponents haven't really tried to do that to him too much. If we look at the strength of schedule here, predictably, we're going to see that Ovince St. Preux has fought the better brand of competition, the more experienced competition. So 1.33 ratio for Boser's overall competition and a 1.71 for St. Preux. Slightly more experienced competition at 11.43 total fights compared to 9.33 for Boser. The average record of a Boser opponent is 5.3-4, while the average record of a St. Preux opponent is 7.2 and 4.2. St. Preux's wins are better. St. Preux's losses are better. Big strength of schedule advantage for St. Preux. Big ground game advantage for St. Preux. But if St. Preux allows this fight to take place on the feet for 15 minutes like he's wont to do, we're going to see that Boser will probably be throwing more volume. Boser will be more accurate. And Boser will be much more defensively sound. So this fight worries me. I think St. Preux's better everywhere. I think he's more powerful. I think he's got better wrestling. He's got the way better ground game, and he's fought the better brand of competition. But fight IQ makes a big fucking difference. And we don't want to be laying money on guys that use stupid game plans. And if we can't count on Ovince St. Preux to use his wrestling, I can't count on betting him here. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting fight. I think it being at heavyweight makes it very interesting. I went back and watched that heavyweight fight with OSP against Ben Rothwell. Just did not like how he looked. He looked very, very, very slow in that fight. He looked tired. He was very, very powerful, though. So Boser's going to have to look out for that. But you kind of mentioned some of my key points here is going to be the volume. OSP, very, very low volume. He does land about 2.62 significant strikes compared to Boser's 4.21, which is just about double there. And then also, the big red flag in OSP potentially not going to his wrestling. Like, he should absolutely go to his wrestling here in this fight. But again, at heavyweight, and in general, I don't know if OSP has the cardio to really implement like a wrestling heavy game plan. But if he does, he's going to have a massive advantage on the mat. It's just we haven't seen. I don't think he has a takedown in like the last 4 fights. And you got to think, you mentioned it, against Jamal Hill. I was kind of expecting to go out there and wrestle, and what did he do? He didn't shoot one takedown. So do you expect him to shoot a takedown here? I'm kind of leaning towards the no. So I got to go with Boser here. I mean, if OSP comes out here and does, shoot for takedowns, I do think he can have some success. But Boser is going to be much, much faster. I think the volume is huge, and I think Boser probably wins the decision. But with that said, man, Boser has been out-voluming his opponents really big in his last 2 fights, and he's still losing these close decisions. I don't know what it is with the judges, but the judges absolutely hate this guy. And he's talking about going out there and getting a finish to really put a stamp on it. I don't know if Boser's going to knock out OSP. OSP's been dropped a ton. He's been knocked out, not much, but he has been dropped a lot. And I don't know if Boser's going to knock him out. But I say Boser by decision But yeah, he outlanded Ilir Latifi in terms of significant strikes, 45-10, and then Tanner Boser versus Arlovsky, 68-34. So yeah, he's kind of getting screwed. So I can see a situation where, hey, he does outland OSP, but the judges screw him again. But I got to go with Boser here. I'm going to take the younger guy, the faster guy, the guy with the more volume. But I don't know. We'll take a look at the line here, and we have Boser opening up -175 on some books. FanDuel and DraftKings have it at -150. I see a book with -138. No props on the fight is a good decision as of now. I don't even know which way I'd land there. I think probably the over, but even then, I'm not going to put money on it. For me, it's probably Boser or pass, but I think the smart move is probably to pass here. I kind of want to see the weigh-ins and see how OSP looks at heavyweight. I know last time he weighed in, I want to say like 240 pounds. So curious to see what he weighs in this time. But for me, it's going to be a Boser, and Boser probably by decision.
Preux's a huge light heavyweight, so
Yeah.
you know, I could see him, you know, even when he fights at light heavyweight, maybe he walks into the cage at 225, you know. So and we know that Boser is, you know, usually in the mid 230s. So like I say, I think there's probably actually going to be a size advantage for St. Preux, even though he's the light heavyweight here. Yeah, this is, you know, I think you nailed it. You know, Boser could easily win a striking-based decision here, and we don't have enough information to suggest that St. Preux is going to go to the wrestling. So I could easily see Boser winning this fight, but I'm not betting it because I think St. Preux's got more ways to win this fight. He just doesn't show that wrestling enough for me to want to go after him here.
100%. You know, say I bet on Tanner Boser, OSP probably does come in here and wrestle and get a Von Flue choke. So exactly, that's just how it works. We'll go to the next fight here. Before we do, if you guys can hit the like, we have one more fight left. Me and Uncle Weezy are going to be doing a main event breakdown on my channel, DFS by the Numbers. Going to be breaking down Gane and Volkov in very deep depth. We usually go about like 35 minutes, like go really into detail. So far, since we've been doing it, we are 2-0. We did pick Zombie and Adesanya. Maybe go 3-0 here, but this is another fight that, just like last week, at least on paper, this looks like a very, very close fight to me. So we have Ciryl Gane, who is 31 years old. He has 6'4", 81-inch reach. We have Alexander Volkov, who is 32 years old, 6'7", 80-inch reach. And I was kind of surprised by the age of Volkov. When I think of Volkov, I kind of think is like an older fighter because, man, this guy's been fighting forever. And I know Uncle Weezy is going to get into the experience, and there's a massive gap there. But Volkov's 6'7". He's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage or 3-inch height advantage and a 1-inch reach disadvantage. So as far as the last couple fights, Ciryl Gane did come in to his UFC debut and knocked out or submitted Rafael Pessoa, and he did submit Dontel Mays as well. And then he did beat Tanner Boser by unanimous decision. And then he knocked out JDS. And then he beat Rosenstruck in what was a very, very boring fight where Rosenstruck threw nothing. As far as Alexander Volkov, his last 5 fights, he knocked out All-Star Overeem in a fight he looked really good. He knocked out Walt Harris in a fight he looked really good. He did lose that decision to Curtis Blades, where Curtis Blades did take him down 14 times. He outpointed Greg Hardy in a decision win. And then he lost by knockout to Derek Lewis in a fight that he was winning every second of the fight up until he got knocked out, kind of how Derek Lewis tends to win fights. So very interesting fight here on paper to me. It looks very close, but I can't wait to dig into it a little bit more and get into the stats.
Yeah, man, this is great. This is a great main event here. The thing that jumps out, you know, off the page for me is how experienced of a mixed martial artist Alexander Volkov is. At 32 years of age, he's been fighting for 12 years, so he probably started at the age of 20 or even 19. 358 minutes in the professional cage, 33 wins, 8 losses, 41 professional fights. And that's 41 professional fights, you know, against 8 for Gane. And if we look at the career length, Alexander Volkov is 32 years old, Ciryl Gane's 31. Alexander Volkov's been doing this for 12 years. Ciryl Gane's been doing it for 2. There is a 10-year experience advantage. And, you know, Volkov's been in the UFC for a while, but before that, he was he Bellator champion?
I know he fought in Bellator for a while.
Yeah, I think he was a Bellator champion too, a heavyweight champion back in the day. You know, so there is a gigantic experience advantage here for Alexander Volkov. 9 UFC fights for Volkov, 5 for Gane. Gane is 5-0. Volkov is 7-2. Volkov could easily be 8-1. Twice as much time in the UFC cage for Alexander Volkov, and a 14.26 average fight time For Volkov, 13.31 for Gane. If we look at the finish stats, Gane has finished 38% of his wins by submission, 38 by TKO. So that is a 76% finish rate. And we got a 73% finish rate for Volkov. He's finished 64% of his wins by knockout, 9% by sub. So, and we also see that, Ciryl Gane has never lost. In 8 professional losses for Volkov, he's been knocked out twice and he's been subbed twice. So Volkov's been finished in 50% of his losses. If we look at the striking stats, we see some very, very similar numbers here. 5.04 out of 9.11 for Gane for a 55% striking accuracy, and we got 5.35 out of 9.12 for a 58% striking accuracy. So the exact same amount of volume thrown. Volkov just a little more accurate. And in terms of the power, Ciryl Gane lands a knockdown in 0.6% of his total significant strikes landed. And for Volkov, it's 0.44. So very similar there. In terms of the defense, though, Ciryl Gane, 70% striking defense. So that's been part of the secret of his success, especially in the Rosenstruik fight, because you don't want that guy hitting you ever. All it takes is one. You saw it against Sakai. We saw it against Overeem. We saw it, we saw Rosenstruik knock dudes out with jabs. Ciryl Gane, when you have a 70% striking defense, it can cover any other holes that you might have in your game. And you would have to assume that Gane's going to have some. He's only got 8 professional fights. He's only been doing this for 2 years. What was he doing before the age of 29? We know that he was kickboxing, and he's a damn good kickboxer. And for a guy with as much kickboxing experience as Gane has, for him to get a couple of champagne submissions like he did in the UFC, he got one by a leg lock. He got some interesting submissions for a kickboxer. So, he's a little bit all around, but you got to believe Volkov is more experienced and probably has more ways to beat Gane than Gane has to beat him. So yeah, definitely a striking defense advantage for Gane. If we look at Volkov and Gane's grappling stats, we see that Volkov has attempted 10 takedowns in 9 fights. He's gotten 7 of them for a 70% takedown accuracy. It's very impressive. While Gane has attempted 19 takedowns in 5 fights, and he has gotten 5 of them for a 26% takedown accuracy. Not very good. 1.13 takedowns per 15 minutes for Gane, 0.82 for Volkov. And we see that Gane has controlled his opponents 11.62% of the time and has really been controlled 0% of the time. While Volkov gets controlled 4 times as much as he controls his opponents. So Volkov got 7.5% control time, while he's allowing 28.5%. Now, 9 fights for Volkov in the UFC, and he has seen 56 takedown attempts. So obviously his opponents are trying to take him down. They don't like boxing with him. Volkov's listed at 6'7", but he's probably more like 6'9" or 6'10". And he throws long, straight punches with a good amount of power on him. So you can tell that Volkov's opponents, with the exception of Derek Lewis, have been trying to take him down. And they've been not willing to strike with him. But Gane only has a 26% takedown defense, and he's a kickboxer first. So when you see somebody with Volkov with a 66% takedown defense, and it would be much better had he never fought Curtis Blades, does Ciryl Gane have the ability to take down Alexander Volkov and hold him down? I say probably not. He's not a good enough wrestler. It's not his background. This is going to be a striking battle. So we got to kind of try to figure out who's going to win the striking battle. Gane's going to be better defensively. They both throw the same amount of volume. They both have power. I would say Gane is more athletic. He moves better. But Volkov probably throws the straighter punches. His punches will probably get there quicker. He's probably faster than Gane. This is a very, very intriguing matchup. But there are 2 things that stick out. Number one, just a gigantic experience advantage. We're talking 33 more fights for Alexander Volkov in a 10-year longer mixed martial arts career. And then we look at, Gane has got a win over Rosenstruik, which is good. He beat a washed-up Junior Dos Santos and probably only knocked him out because he hit him in the back of the head 3 consecutive times. The win against Tanner Boser isn't bad. You know, a win against Don'Tale Mays and Rafael Pessoa, okay. Nothing, it's not going to knock your socks off. And then you look at Volkov, and it's Alistair Overeem, Walt Harris, Curtis Blades, Greg Hardy, and Derek Lewis. There's a big strength to schedule advantage for Alexander Volkov. There is a big experience advantage for Alexander Volkov. I believe he's the more well-rounded mixed martial artist. I think if one of these guys is going to get takedowns, it'll be Volkov, but I don't really see him going for them. I see Gane probably is the guy who's more likely to attempt takedowns, but I don't think he's going to get him against Volkov. The guy's 6'10". It's almost impossible to take down somebody that's 6'10". They're always going to find a base. So I see this being a striking battle. I see this probably going over because these guys don't have what I would call fight-changing power for heavyweights as compared to a lot of their contemporaries, right? I mean, not, against a guy like Walt Harris or Rosenstruik or some of these other power punchers, Dawkins, Volkov and Gane really don't fit into that mold. They're a little more finesse. So I see this being a 5-round striking bout. I see Volkov coming out on top. I think he's got more ways to win this fight. And I'm hanging my hat on that experience advantage and the strength of schedule advantage.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a fun matchup because you take a look at the stats and they are pretty similar, but then you take a look at the experience and it's just, night and day. 41 fights for Volkov, 8 fights for Ciryl Gane. And something I want to point out, Volkov in his UFC career, these are his only losses. Okay, Curtis Blades, where Curtis Blades did take him down 14 times, but he was able to get up a lot of those times. And he did, turn it on, later in the fight when Curtis Blades did gas out a little bit. It was a little bit too late there, but yeah, lost a decision there against Curtis Blades. Really no shame in that. And his other loss was against Derek Lewis, somebody that's probably going to be fighting for a title soon, somebody that he outlanded him 121-39. So he was winning the whole entire fight up until the last 11 seconds where Derek Lewis pulled something out of his hat and knocked out Volkov. So 2 losses, Blades and Lewis, 2 of the best fighters in the heavyweight division. And yeah, the experience gap is pretty huge there for Volkov, and it's really not even close. Something I do want to point out though is, although Volkov has been fighting for a while, he has a ton of experience. He is 32 years old, which is pretty young for a heavyweight, especially. I'm seeing some changes and improvements in his game. He's put on some weight, and you see that somebody pointed in the chat. He's put on some weight. He's put on some muscle, and he's looking good. He's looking like, there's more pop on his punches. We went out there and knocked out Walt Harris. He went out there and he knocked out Overeem, and I like it. He's coming forward more, it looks like, and he's just been looking very, very good. But this is going to be a very interesting test against Ciryl Gane, who is probably going to have the speed advantage. Like you mentioned, he's going to have the athletic advantage for sure. But the small cage, talk about the small cage. I think it does favor Volkov, somebody he's going to want to pressure in this fight. Gane's going to want to stay on his bike, stay on the outside. And I think the smaller cage is going to favor a guy like Volkov. In terms of the fight as itself, in terms of skill sets and how the fight plays out, I see this as a very, very close fight. I think it's 50-50. I think it's very evenly matched. I do see this probably going to decision based off the fact that both guys don't have much power. Some people might disagree with this, but I actually think Volkov at this point is the harder hitter. Like, he's been hitting hard, and you take a look at it, at his record, and Volkov actually has a ton of knockout wins. I mean, a lot of people think of this guy as a decisionator, and yes, he has a lot of decisions in the UFC, but this guy Volkov has a 76% finish rate, and so does Ciryl Gane, 38% by knockout, 38% by submission. Volkov, 67% of his wins by knockout. So I do think he has that power. He has that volume. Both guys have volume. I see this fight being razor close. And taking a look at the line, it just doesn't reflect that. We have Ciryl Gane, who is minus 185, minus 180. The comeback on Volkov, plus 160, plus 152. Like, that line makes no sense to me. I see it pretty much as a pick 'em, and honestly, maybe even a slight favorite to Volkov just based off the experience. Like, the experience gap is just so huge, so crazy. Where Volkov's fighting, guys that are the best in division, like Curtis Blades, like a Derek Lewis. Where Ciryl Gane, yes, he's submitting Rafael Pessoa, he's submitting Dontel Mays, he's beating Tanner Boser, he's beating a washed up JDS, he's beating Rosenstruck, somebody that threw nothing in that fight. This is clearly going to be Gane's first test of his career. First serious test of his career. Yes, you can argue Rosenstruck was a good test for him, but Rosenstruck didn't show up in that fight. But yeah, this is going to be a very important test here. I see it being close. I honestly think it can go either way, but with the experience of Volkov and just how good he's been looking, the muscle he's been packing on, the power of Volkov. Looks like he has more power nowadays as well. The pressure's looking good. I'm kind of leaning Volkov here as an underdog. So we'll take a look at the odds. Like I said, Gane is a decent-sized favorite. I'd be shocked if that line got any wider. Like, the line legit makes no sense to me. I know there's serious hype on Ciryl Gane, but I just don't see how anybody can warrant Gane as nearly a 2-to-1 favorite. It just makes no sense. As far as the fight goes to decision, it did open up at plus 105, and that line's already been hit. It's now at minus 105 for the fight to go to decision. I say it does. I think if there's a finish in this fight, it's going to be from the Volkov side, actually. I'd be kind of shocked if Gane did finish Volkov, but I like Volkov. I like Volkov straight at that money line, and maybe take a look at the over depending on where they set it. I have a feeling you're going to set it like 4.5. In a heavyweight fight, you probably want to pass there, but I like Volkov here.
I like Volkov too, and the fact that you're getting plus money on this guy to me is just insane. That huge experience advantage is not something that you want to overlook. And I just did a quick little calculation here while you were talking, and if it weren't for the Curtis Blades fight, Alexander Volkov would have 84% takedown.
That's crazy.
In the UFC.
Yeah.
So I think people that are thinking that Ciryl Gane is, and you might be able to take down Dontel Mays, you might be able to take down Rafael Pessoa, but he's not taking down Volkov. And if he wants to run like he did in the Rosenstruck fight, Rosenstruck's only 6 feet tall. He's listed at 6'4", but that dude's 6 feet. I'm taller than that dude. This guy is 6'10". We're talking about a guy that's almost a foot taller than his previous opponent, and he's going to be able to reach you. He's going to be able to cut off that cage. This guy isn't going to follow you. Volkov's not going to follow you. He'll take that. Even if you're just circling, to the right, he's not going to follow you. He's going to take a step to the left and cut you off. And I really do think that Volkov should be the favorite here. I think it's insane that Volkov is not just plus money, but what is he, like plus 140?
Plus 150, plus 160, yeah.
Dude, the money is still coming in on Gane here. And I want to remind everybody that this isn't a kickboxing match. It's a mixed martial arts fight. And that Ciryl Gane got some submissions against some bums, but he's not a better grappler than Alexander Volkov. I hate to break that to you guys, but he's not. Yeah, I don't think he's even going to get this fight to the ground. And he's going to be, both of these guys are good athletes, and Volkov is hitting a lot harder now. Yeah, man, I wouldn't lay that juice on Gane. I kind of do like this fight to go to decision. I think Gane's going to run a lot. I think this probably will be a low-volume fight. I don't know if Gane's going to want to be standing in front of Alexander Volkov, and I don't think that he will. So I think this fight will go to decision. I think getting that kind of plus money on Volkov is just too good to be true. But, it's not like there isn't a path to victory for Gane. He moves very well. He's excellent defensively. And in a striking match where we don't plan to see a whole lot of grappling, sometimes just being good defensively is enough to win on the judges' scorecards. So this is going to be an interesting fight. I can't wait to break it down in further detail with you later on tonight, though.
100%. Yeah. I mean, like I said, this is a very, very close fight. Honestly, can go either way. We have a lot of Gane fans in the chat. Understandable, very hyped guy. But a lot of people might not know this, but Volkov is actually a brown belt in BJJ. His grappling is really, really solid. The dude hasn't been submitted in a long time. I think he got submitted like really, really early in his career. Gane, he's not going to submit him, and that's not happening. Volkov's grappling is very, very underrated. Yes, Curtis Blades was able to take him down, but again, that was Curtis Blades. So no shame in that. I like Volkov. I see a lot of love for Gane out there. I don't really recommend laying the minus 200 or whatever it is for Gane. But if you like him, yeah, I mean, he has a path to victory for sure. I think this fight can go either way, but you're giving me plus 150, plus 160 on a fight that's honestly should be a pick 'em. I'll take the dog all day there. But hit up the chat real quick. I love Volk, but no way. Gane is a juggernaut. Yeah, lots of people like Gane. Volkov will hardly be able to hit him. Like you said, he runs a lot, and if you don't have one-shot power, you won't hit him. Yeah, well, definitely. Yeah, I mean, both his striking defense is very good. Gane's striking defense, we'll see for sure. So he's not winning by decision, KO, or sub. So how does he win? Volkov's not winning by. I can see Volkov winning by either decision or KO. I don't think it's gonna be a sub either way. All right, so we'll get out of here. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, especially on a Sunday, especially on Father's Day. Shout out to all the dads out there. Happy Father's Day to you. You can follow me on Twitter, DFS_numbers. YouTube is, of course, DFS by the numbers. Go check me out over there. Me and Uncle Weezy are going to be dropping down a main event prediction video. Go ahead over there and check it out tomorrow. I will be live on Pub Sports Radio at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday. And yeah, looking forward to the card as a whole. I'll kick it over to Uncle Weezy. Let him know where he can find you, man.
First, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Happy Father's Day to my dad. You can find me on YouTube at Uncle Weezy, UNCLEWEEZY. Check out my channel. I do balls deep breakdowns and usually at least 3 fights every week. Brady and I do our main event breakdown on DFS by the Numbers channel. We do Stat Diggers right here every Sunday, 6:15 Central Time, 7:15 Eastern. Thank you all for watching. We really appreciate you spending your Sunday nights with us. I appreciate each and every one of you. Don't forget to ground and pound that like button on the way out. Thank you to Pub Sports Radio for having me on. I really like doing this show with you, man. I get a ton out of it. I hope our audience gets as much out of it as we do.
100%. I get a ton out of it as well. So hopefully we make some money this week. Hopefully there's some good spots on the card. Yes, a lot of spots stuck out to me. Some interesting violence bets and some interesting straight bets as well. So if you guys could hit the like button on the way out. Thanks again for hanging out, and we will see you guys very soon. Good luck on UFC Vegas.